Hi everyone, welcome to 1% Crime. I know you can't sleep, so I'll accompany you with crime stories that happened all over the world. Before we get to the story, tell me where did you hear it from? And if you like this content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's jump straight into the story. A paradise beach turned into a death track for lovers. It is believed that an investigation on the heels of a crime is the most effective and often leads to success. The methodology itself implies immediate response, operational collection of evidence, and questioning of witnesses, which significantly increases the chances of quickly solving the case and holding the guilty accountable. However, if it is not possible to identify the perpetrator, the investigation can drag on for years and even decades until the criminal case is frozen and transferred to the archive after the statute of limitations expires. However, sometimes unsolved and seemingly hopeless investigations receive unexpected developments many years later, which helps to find the right lead and achieve results when no one believed it anymore. The case of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen, which had been gathering dust on the shelves for almost 15 years, is a prime example of this. At the time, it was not possible to solve it despite the operational actions of the investigative team and the high reward offered for any information. The main problem was the lack of motive for such a brutal act against the loving couple. In addition to this, it was not possible to find any witnesses, murder weapons, or any significant clues. It was a typical dead end, and no one hoped that the truth would ever be discovered. However, a decade and a half later, solving this case was helped by another brutal crime. It also turned out that at least 4 people knew what had happened, but all these years they remained silent. Who were Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen? Lindsay Cutshall was born in the small town of White Eyes in Coshocton County, Ohio in 1982. She grew up in a very religious family, and her father was a pastor of a Christian community. Despite a strict upbringing from childhood, she was very active, engaged in sports, and later became interested in hiking and extreme tourism. After finishing school, Lindsay became a student at Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia. During those years, she regularly climbed mountains of various difficulty levels, rafted down turbulent mountain rivers, and even organized hikes herself. The young woman dreamed of founding her own summer camp for children and teenagers, where she could teach them the basics of survival in the wild, rafting, tourism, and so on. Jason Allen was born in the city of Zeeland in the American state of Michigan in 1978. He also grew up in a deeply religious family, and from a teenage age was seriously interested in hiking tours, mastering survival in the wild. The young man was tall, athletic, toned, possessed leadership qualities, and was able to find like-minded people to conquer new heights. The couple met in 2002 during a hiking trip in the Appalachians. At that time, Lindsay was still a student, while Jason worked as a mountain guide and climbing instructor. The young people immediately felt mutual sympathy, and just 6 months after their first meeting, the young man came to the girl's parents and asked for their daughter's hand in marriage. Her parents were not opposed and gave their blessing to the lovers. The young man's parents also approved of his choice, after which the couple was officially engaged. Allen presented the young woman with a beautiful diamond ring for this occasion, which was soon to be complemented by another, an engagement ring. The young couple planned to get married in September 2004, had big plans for their future together, and wanted to buy their own large house where they could live comfortably and raise their children. Unfortunately, these plans were not meant to come true. The final trip. In the summer of 2004, Lindsay and Jason worked as senior counselors at a Christian summer camp called Rock and Water, located in El Dorado County, California. After their wedding, they planned to open their own similar camp, so they were gaining experience and learning the nuances of working with the younger generation. On the evening of Friday, August 14th of that year, the couple decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. They informed their colleagues of their plans in advance, leaving 2 of the most experienced counselors in charge of the camp. Lindsay and Jason promised to return by Monday, so their short journey was expected to cause no complications either for the couple or for their temporary replacements. They set off in a 1992 red Ford Tempo, owned by Lindsay, and that was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, the counselors had not returned to the camp, but no alarm was raised then, as everyone was confident that the couple would arrive either late at night or early Monday morning. However, when it was discovered after the morning roll call at 8 a.m. that Jason and Lindsay were still missing and their phones were unreachable, their colleagues decided to contact the police, and also informed the missing couple's families about the situation. The parents, horrified upon hearing the news, rushed to the camp to learn more about the incident. Everyone knew that the couple was very responsible in their duties. They were never late, and if any unforeseen circumstances had occurred, they would have found a way to communicate that. The challenging search. Upon arrival at the camp, law enforcement officials interviewed the couple's colleagues, and the investigation immediately encountered a serious problem. No one could precisely say where the young couple had gone. It was only known that they planned to explore around San Francisco, and given their great love for adventure and extreme leisure, they could be in the most remote corners where there was neither communication nor civilization. While the police waited the legally mandated 2 days during which the missing were expected to report themselves, relatives and friends decided not to just sit back, but to organize a search themselves. They called everyone they knew, trying to find out when the couple last made contact with anyone, distributed flyers with photos of the bride and groom, and requested anyone who might have seen them to respond immediately. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search operation. The main search unfolded around San Francisco, its suburbs and surroundings. However, the area was vast, and it was simply not possible to thoroughly comb through it. Then, one of the friends noted that the couple loved the wild, rocky beaches that were always beautiful and secluded, prompting the police to focus on these areas. Bodies in sleeping bags. For several days, the search yielded no results, and the hope of finding the couple alive was diminishing rapidly. Then, on Wednesday, August 19th, a patrol helicopter flying over one of the rocky, wild beaches reported that 2 bodies were found in sleeping bags on the desolate coast, and it seemed unlikely they were just resting there. The first thing police encountered upon arriving at the scene was a red Ford Tempo parked on a cliff near a lookout point in a small shelter for tourists, from which a steep trail led directly to the scenic, wild beach. The car was immediately checked in the database and found to belong to the missing student, Lindsay Cutshall. Descending the trail to the beach, law enforcement found 2 bright sleeping bags containing individuals. At first, it might have seemed they were merely sleeping, but no response came to calls or noise. Approaching closer, the officers saw that the sleeping bags contained a young man and woman, both showing no signs of life. A brief initial examination suggested that their lives had been taken by gunshot wounds to the head, and given the distinctive smell of decomposition, they had been there for more than a day. All the belongings of the deceased, including mobile phones and wallets containing bank cards and cash, were found beside them. Therefore, a robbery as the main motive was almost immediately ruled out. The keys to the parked car above were also visibly placed, ruling out car theft as a motive. Investigators immediately suspected that the deceased were the same young people who had gone missing last week near San Francisco. Their suspicion was confirmed by documents found nearby under the names Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen, but the bodies still needed to be identified by relatives. The arriving parents of the couple, who had hoped until the last that the remains belonged to someone else, were devastated by grief upon recognizing their children. Investigation and initial theories. Thus, theories involving robbery or an attempted carjacking were dismissed since all valuables, money, and keys were left untouched in plain sight. Moreover, forensic analysis revealed no signs of physical assault or intimate assault on the bodies, except for the gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were simply sleeping peacefully at the time of the incident and did not have a chance to react. They made no attempt to defend themselves, flee, or even get out of their sleeping bags. Everything pointed to a swift act that resembled an execution or vendetta. But who could have taken the lives of 2 individuals in such a brutal manner, and why? The questions multiplied, but no answers were forthcoming. There were no signs that anyone else had stayed in the area. The beach was quite secluded, and accessing it via the steep trail was challenging. Despite efforts, no shell casings were found nearby, leading investigators to theorize that the shooter either took them or threw them into the ocean. The shots had been fired at close range into the heads of the sleeping tourists, indicated by specific traces, so the casings, if not deliberately moved, would have been nearby. Interestingly, the beach appeared quite clean, yet a few meters from where the sleeping bags with the bodies were found, an empty beer bottle lay. The deceased did not drink alcohol, as they led a healthy lifestyle, suggesting the bottle might belong to the mysterious shooter. This particular brand of beer was rarely found in the area, and likely came from a neighboring state. As no other clues were found, this bottle was considered a significant lead, although it was unclear whether it had any connection to the shooter or the crime. A theory was proposed that the deceased might have had a conflict with someone the day before the tragedy, and their opponent returned at night with a weapon to settle the score. Although Jason and Lindsay were very friendly with everyone, it was not excluded that they might have inadvertently displeased someone either in appearance or for some other reason. Additionally, the shooter could have been intoxicated or mentally unstable. From the bullets extracted from the victims' skulls, experts determined they were fired from a Marlin brand rifle, .45 caliber, model 1894, produced by Marlin Firearms Company. This was a rare weapon that might have been part of a collector's arsenal. Such models were typically used for hunting. This clue was significant for the ongoing investigation, but it remained the only one for the time being. Investigators speculated that the shooter was likely a male acting alone. He could have been a hunter, collector, or firearm enthusiast. The couple's route, search, and witness interviews. The investigation now aimed to establish the route the couple had taken, who they might have contacted, and when they were last seen alive. The first task presented few issues, as the couple had taken numerous photos, and their camera remained untouched among their personal belongings. Additionally, in the tourist cabin near the lookout point where they parked their car, there was a guest book where visitors could leave notes. The engaged couple had written a couple of entries expressing that it was one of the best weekends of their lives, filled with love, happiness, and the discovery of perhaps the most beautiful beach they had ever seen. It was discovered that on Saturday, the couple had stopped at a fishing pier about 20 miles from where their lives were ultimately taken. This was evidenced by the photographs they had taken there, prompting law enforcement to visit the area and speak with locals in search of potential witnesses. Many remembered the young couple traveling in a red car. They were looking for a place to stay overnight, but found no vacancies in any of the 3 nearby hotels. This was because August is peak tourist season in the area, and most travelers booked their accommodations well in advance. The couple then dined at a local restaurant, walked around the area, took several photos, and set off again in the evening. According to everyone who saw and interacted with them, they were friendly, engaged in no conflicts, and appeared happy and carefree. None of the witnesses could recall anything suspicious or unusual. Notably, the beach where the bodies were found was located in a protected area where camping was prohibited. However, since the young people could not find a place to stay overnight, they decided to settle on the beach, but chose not to set up a tent, instead using their sleeping bags. They believed that on a warm August night on a secluded beach, they faced no threats, and planned to head back at dawn to return to the Rock and Water camp on Sunday as promised. This information helped narrow down the time frame during which the couple was likely taken from life. They went to sleep, but did not survive until morning, indicating they were likely taken from life between 11 o'clock Saturday night and dawn on Sunday. The first suspect. Although the investigation into the double taking of life was in full swing, and news broadcasts urged anyone with any relevant information to contact the police, law enforcement withheld certain details. In particular, the results of the ballistics analysis were kept secret to avoid alerting the suspect and prompting them to hastily dispose of the weapon used in the crime. Initially, suspicion fell on a local drifter who periodically slept on that very beach and had been seen nearby on the evening before the crime. The homeless man, mentioned by some witnesses, was quickly located, brought to the station, and interrogated. The 57-year-old suspect had no alibi for the night of the crime. However, his involvement could not be confirmed. The main reasons were the absence of the weapon used in the crime, and the fact that his DMA did not match that found on the beer bottle discovered on the beach. A new phase of the investigation in 2006. For nearly 2 years, the investigation had been at a standstill with no clear direction on how to proceed. Then, in the spring of 2006, law enforcement decided to publicize the data they had on the weapon used in the crime and to reach out again to potential witnesses by offering a $50,000 reward for any useful information that could lead to the perpetrator. Following this announcement, about 1,000 calls came in, but most did not aid the advancement of the investigation. However, law enforcement became interested in 26-year-old Sean Gallen, pointed out by several locals. According to them, the young man collected firearms and bladed weapons, behaved aggressively, was frequently involved in conflicts, threatened acts of violence, and occasionally damaged other people's property. Sean was arrested and questioned. He had previously been on the police's radar for brawling, hooliganism, and driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. He indeed had an impressive collection of weapons, but the specific rifle in question was not among them. Verifying his alibi from 2 years prior proved impossible, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, so Gallon had to be released. A suspect from another country? Simultaneously, another suspicious and aggressive drifter came under scrutiny, often seen with a firearm, frightening the local residents. His name was Joseph Henry Burgess, and he was 61 years old at the time of the couple's demise. Burgess often ranted about receiving commands from God. It was discovered that in the late 1970s, Joseph lived in Canada, where he also wandered aimlessly. In 1978, he joined the Commune of the Children of God, positioning himself as a deeply religious person, and according to those around him, he was quite the fanatic. He soon had a conflict with two young people that escalated into outright enmity, and a few weeks later, these individuals were found lifeless, each with several close-range gunshot wounds to the head. Notably, their bodies were also discovered on a beach in sleeping bags, seemingly taken while they slept. By the time the police arrived, Burgess had vanished. His guilt was proven through numerous left-behind clues, but he could not be convicted as he had fled to the USA, crossing the border illegally. He managed to evade capture for nearly a quarter of a century until the police connected him with the double homicide on a beach in California. However, they were unable to interrogate him as a shootout occurred during his apprehension, resulting in the deaths of a police sergeant and Burgess himself, who opened fire, a fatal echo from the past. In the spring of 2017 in Forestville, California, a tragedy unfolded one night on March 14th. Gunshots rang out in the Gallon family home, prompting alarmed neighbors to immediately call the police. The victim was 35-year-old Seamus Gallon, and the perpetrator was his older brother, Sean. An argument had erupted between the siblings during which Sean, under the influence of prohibited substances, grabbed a firearm and discharged 3 bullets into his younger brother. Police recognized the shooter's name, as Sean had previously been detained as a suspect in the double homicide on a beach, but was released due to a lack of evidence. Since then, he had been in police sights twice for property damage and making threats, but had only received fines. It was also discovered that the detainee was an avid hunter and had a hobby of crafting knives and other bladed weapons. Those around him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After taking his brother's life, Sean attempted to flee, but was almost immediately apprehended. Law enforcement then decided to thoroughly reinvestigate this man's potential involvement in a couple's perpetration from 13 years prior. His personal social media page revealed much, where he posted pictures of his substantial weapon collection and discussed supposed telepathic and extrasensory abilities. According to his posts, he believed he was on a special mission, receiving assignments from space. This seemed like delusions of a disturbed mind, and police suspected Sean indeed had serious mental disorders. He stubbornly refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke nonsensically, and insisted on his innocence. However, when detectives checked the personal messages on his deceased brother's page, they found something intriguing. Back in 2006, when a $50,000 reward was offered for information on the double homicide case, Sean's former girlfriend had messaged Seamus, suggesting she could claim the reward by turning in her ex-boyfriend. They both knew everything, but kept silent. Unfortunately, questioning either was no longer possible since the brother had been shot, and the woman had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. An unexpected confession. Initially, Sean denied any involvement and refused to speak, but when shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, he surprisingly confessed and began to give a detailed account. His narrative not only surprised, but shocked law enforcement. Despite more than 13 years passing since the double homicide, Gowan remembered the details of that night vividly. That evening, he had left his house with a Marlin rifle. Intending to hunt in a wooded area, he aimlessly wandered for a couple of hours before descending a trail to a wild beach, which he claimed was a spot to encounter boars. As he walked along the shore, he spotted 2 bright sleeping bags. Approaching closer, he discovered a young man and woman sound asleep inside. He stood watching them for several minutes, then suddenly heard voices in his head commanding him to end their lives. Sean claimed this was the mission from space he could not ignore. He placed the barrel of his rifle almost against the young man's head and pulled the trigger. The sound woke the young woman, but before she could comprehend the situation, a second shot ended her life as well. He decided to collect the casings and carried them away in a beer can he had emptied while descending to the beach. Later, according to him, he tossed the can into some bushes in his father's backyard, where he went to give the rifle to his father and ask him to hide it. His elderly father asked no questions and simply buried the weapon in the dirt floor of the cellar in his old barn. Remarkably, Sean's claims were verified. The rifle was found at the site of the now collapsed barn, and the beer can with the casings still rested in the overgrown bushes in the backyard. The fact that the murderer's father had passed away in 2009 and his property had since fallen into disrepair and abandonment helped preserve these items. It turned out that the bottle found on the beach had no connection to the crime and was mistakenly considered as evidence. Forensic psychiatric evaluation Sean Goen blamed the voices in his head, which he claimed ordered him to commit acts of violence, and asserted that he was not aware of his actions. His defense attorneys also insisted that Sean was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. It was up to qualified psychiatrists to determine the truth of these claims. The evaluation revealed that the accused did indeed suffer from a range of mental disorders, exacerbated by the effects of alcohol and prohibited substances. However, at the time of the crime, he acted deliberately, carefully planning each step. Sean was fully aware of how to proceed and how to cover his tracks to avoid police detection. This was precisely why he first ended the life of the young man, knowing that if anything went awry, the woman would not be able to resist. For the same reason, he took the casings with him and prudently gave the rifle to his father, asking him to hide it. According to the psychiatrists, although Gallon had mental deviations, he was competent to stand trial and be held accountable for his actions. What was surprising in this complex case was that his parents, brother, and former girlfriend knew, or at least suspected, that he had committed the double homicide, yet none of them had turned him over to the police. Trial and sentence. The trial of the accused took place in the spring of 2019, nearly 15 years after the brutal act against the couple. On June 17th of that year, Sean Gallon was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 94 years for the end of his own brother's life in 2017. The convicted man is now serving his sentence in a special prison unit designated for particularly dangerous inmates with mental disorders. He continues to claim that he hears voices and behaves aggressively. Hence he is kept under special surveillance to prevent him from harming himself or anyone else nearby. Lastly, it should be noted that the motive for the double homicide was never established. Sean simply saw the couple sleeping on the beach and decided to end their lives. A garbage collector was paralyzed on January 22, 2023, after sifting through a trash container near the Columbia Park to find what was at the bottom of it. A blue suitcase was inside, sealed with black tape and surrounded by several garbage bags. The suitcase contained a woman's body, which was easily identified because her head was visible from the suitcase. The worker was frightened upon finding something, so he drove several blocks and reported it to the police. The Capitol Police promptly dispatched a team of officers to investigate. Can you provide some examples? The police officers who arrived were met with a horrifying scene. The corpse was cradled in the suitcase and taken away. Valentina was identified as the victim a few hours later. At the outset, the body was found to be free from any indications of violence, firearms or knives, and it was not dismembered. Can you provide some examples? After opening the suitcase, detectives discovered that the woman was wearing pajamas with a belt, suggesting that she had been attacked while sleeping by the person who killed her. A black cardboard box on the side of the suitcase contained items that helped identify the body. Police found a student ID, password used by the victim when applying for a certificate, as well as some documents and personal belongings among them. The investigating team found it peculiar as the presence of documents in such cases was not typical. Can you provide some examples? The police contacted the woman's family after finding the suitcase with her body, and they confirmed that she was with friends on Saturday, January 21st. The woman was found to have been struck multiple times in the head during the forensic examination. Her body was found with multiple injuries, including bleeding from the right part of her tongue and 5 cuts around her neck that indicated strangulation. Valentina was born on December 16, 2001 in Bogota, Colombia. She was enrolled in the Faculty of Commerce and International Business. The girl was a music enthusiast from an early age. After completing her professional DJ diploma, she was granted access to work as a DJ in Colombia due to her exceptional talent and musical sense. She had a career that began 3 years ago and resulted in many foreign friends. Valentina traveled to other countries where she typically gained knowledge or exhibited her accomplishments. She had the chance to perform alongside some of the most renowned musicians during this period. She toured over 20 cities in the country and was present at significant international events of this kind. Her past activities involved performing at festivals and touring throughout Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. People in her vicinity claimed that she had a bright future ahead. She was sought after and traveled throughout the nation. She dominated the best nightclubs and pursued her passion. Valentina was a very happy, smiling young girl who enjoyed the party. She maintained social media accounts where she shared her stage performances and always kept her followers informed about her daily routine. Can you provide some examples? In the electronic music industry of Colombia, she was recently recognized as the best amateur DJ. The girl shared about two things on her social media: her rising popularity in the electronic music industry at nightclubs and her relationship with an American named John Poulos, whom she met online by the end of 2021. John and Valentina's communication skills improved as time passed. Valentina's initial desire for stability and commitment was not strong, but her relationship with him transformed into a romantic partnership that the young people eventually shared. John Poulos was a resident of America. Valentina was so invested in her life that he sent her money to attend the cosmetic course that involved injecting her lips with hyaluronic acid. The procedure was repeated to improve her cheekbones, and John also suggested surgery and silicone breast implants for his partner, modifying her appearance within a few months and becoming the talk of the town. He started sending money to the girl on a regular basis, and eventually came up with the idea of marrying her. Originally, Poulos had plans to move to Colombia and live with Valentina, but she was skeptical because this person was so envious that he hired a private detective to track all her contacts and activities. Valentina's family was highly suspicious as she expressed her concern about this situation. John Poulos was prepared to spend the rest of his life with his partner by January 2023. He was committed to marrying Valentina and initiated the process of organizing the necessary paperwork. He rented an apartment in the northern area of Bogota, where he planned to spend the weekends with the girl until they found a permanent place to live. On Thursday, January 19th, Poulos arrived in Bogota. Around 8:53 p.m., he was caught on surveillance footage entering the building's apartment. Along with him, there was a blue suitcase that bore resemblance to the one used to find Valentina's corpse. John Poulos was the first person to be noticed after the disturbing discovery, as he was also the last one to have seen Valentina alive. The detective's attempt to reach him resulted in the call being diverted to voicemail. Valentina's family members found Poulos to be a kind and collected individual. His demeanor was undeniable, and his plans to marry the young woman were evident. They were unable to fathom his involvement in this terrible crime, but these doubts were eliminated when investigators arrived at the apartment rental building, where it was discovered that the man had already left and was not found. On Monday, January 23rd, John Poulos took down his social media profiles in the early morning following Valentina's death. He was the sole suspect at that point. The revelation was made evident when investigators analyzed the surveillance camera footage in the building. From Friday evening to early Sunday morning, the Colombian police and prosecutor's office examined hours of video footage from cameras in the areas where the young woman and her boyfriend were. The trash container was where the body was disposed of at this point. The footage and numerous WhatsApp conversations were instrumental in uncovering the girl's final hours. On January 20th, Valentina and Poulos made a deal to meet. Can you provide some examples? The man arrived on the 19th the day before and took up residence in the apartment where the couple had planned to live. After he texted Valentina, they started arguing on the same night because she was at a party with her friend and didn't anticipate him coming over. He inquired about the presence of significant individuals at the gathering and whether she was with any male. She wryly replied with a no reply, stating that it was his suspicions and they had agreed to meet on the 20th. Prior to meeting John, Valentina had planned to visit various locations to care for herself, apply her lash extensions, and attend hair salons. On January 20th, the couple were unable to see each other due to their disagreement, and only in the evening when Valentina's apartment was being monitored by surveillance cameras. Did they know exactly when they were in that parking lot? The girl's possessions were being packed by John at 6 p.m. as the two of them moved to another apartment and began a new life. Valentina's journey across the country was marked by a series of emotional goodbyes, one of which was with her family and friends. She made a video call to her mother saying that she was going home. The video depicts the girl accompanied by Poulos, who hired a vehicle to transport Valentina's possessions. They were caught on surveillance footage entering the apartment with their possessions at 7 p.m. Valentina sent her mother a series of videos showing the apartment and their frequent exchanges to get things. The cameras captured them completing the move and engaging in other activities before heading back to their new home. It was Saturday, January 21st at 1 a.m. Around 3 a.m., the couple arranged a taxi to go to southeastern New York's nightclub where Valentina was set to perform. 2 hours later. Can you provide some examples? The club was reached by them at approximately 4 a.m. Valentina commenced work almost immediately. While she was busy, John Poulos remained with her. Can you provide some examples? At approximately 5 a.m., her performance concluded. Valentina and John, holding hands, headed to the nightclub's office. They encountered the proprietor of the establishment, his spouse, and her companion. Valentina's friends had not seen her since they'd left the venue at 6 a.m. Her smile was back on her face, shining brightly, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Valentina contacted her friend on the phone and stated that she had no intention of going anywhere on Saturday. She stated that she would probably stay in the apartment with her partner. Later on, they might go out to eat or cook together at their house. The last time Valentina spoke to her friend was at 9 p.m., and it was through video. Valentina's mother, Laura Hidalgo, revealed that her 13-year-old son was the final individual to converse with her on video. The girl was in bed with John. They both appeared to be in a state of happiness. The family had no further information about them. On January 21st, at 10:43 p.m., surveillance cameras in the building captured the young woman and her boyfriend. In the video, Valentina can be seen peering out of the apartment door while John stands in front of it. He seems contemplative and a little menacing, pacing back and forth, occasionally grimacing his face. He orders the elevator to go down and retrieve a delivery. Poulos was captured by the cameras again on Sunday, January 22nd, at 9 a.m. He exits the room with 2 bags of garbage. Valentina was nowhere to be found on this occasion. The man drives to the parking area, takes a silver car, and places the bags in the back seat. Following that, he goes back to the apartment and retrieves 2 suitcases from the trunk. Subsequently, he heads back to the apartment. A gray blanket covers the suitcase that Poulos removed from the apartment where the clerk reads 10 a.m. He put it into a cart for shipping. A second bag was situated beside it. Valentina's head was wrapped in the blanket. The man surveys the parking area after parking. He perceives that nobody is in the vicinity. Moving ahead, he looks over to make sure nobody is going down in the elevator. Subsequently, he rapidly makes his way back to the vehicle. He glances at the mirror one last time and takes a sip of water before struggling to lift the heavy suitcase, which he puts in the trunk. The bag is the next item on the list. Subsequently, he takes control of the vehicle and departs. Surveillance cameras caught the car at different locations throughout the city around noon. It was evident that the subject was in search of a suitable spot to leave the suitcase. The car entered one of the parks and parked near the garbage containers at approximately 3 p.m. The driver exited and headed towards the container at that juncture. He surveyed the area, verified that no one was watching, and then removed the suitcase, which seemed excessive, before tossing it into the container. He went back to the car and removed the bag, which he then placed in the trash bin, closed the lid, and exited. The vehicle was traveling westward until it reached El Dorado International Airport. John's last known whereabouts were at the airport at 4:30 p.m. A $1 million reward was announced by the Ministry of Security on Monday, January 23rd, for any information that could lead to the arrest of the person or persons responsible for the murder of Valentina Tres Palacios. The Colombian authorities enlisted the help of Interpol to issue an arrest warrant as Poulos fled the country's border without indicating why. Additionally, he was the final person to witness the girl's existence. Can you provide some examples? On January 24th, the National Police of Panama stated that they had apprehended Poulos at El Dorado International Airport while he was traveling to Turkey. In an effort to obtain answers about Valentina's death, Colombian authorities quickly began the process of deporting him to the country. Over 14 criminal investigation specialists contributed to the investigation, collecting evidence to establish the facts. The analysis of over 300 hours of video footage from cameras was the outcome of methodological work carried out in partnership with the country's prosecutor office. The case yielded another crucial finding after the arrest of this individual. Valentina's mobile phone was discovered near the El Dorado International Airport by a security staff member. He stumbled upon a mobile phone on the grass while walking near a tenth-of-a-minute gas station and picked it up. The man brought the discovered gadget home after he realized that it did not have a SIM card. He took the phone to sell it, unaware that it belonged to Valentina. The security guard's wife called him hours later in despair when she realized that the photo of the girl and the wallpaper on the mobile phone were identical to those seen on social media, and also for the young woman found dead in the trash container. Unfortunately, the phone had already been marked for sale and repackaged because someone was willing to buy it. Therefore, information that could have been advantageous in this situation went unguarded. Can you provide some examples? Following that, the driver of the car that the couple had driven to the nightclub gave his testimony, which was followed by a big question. The driver was tasked with transporting the couple to a nightclub located in the southern part of the city. Before getting into the car, Poulos paused for a moment before Valentina exited. She got into the car and screamed that she had written something untoward. The driver looked at her in disbelief before checking his phone and finding out that Tres Palacios had sent him a message to customer care warning him in Spanish that he was in danger. The driver looked at the girl and inquired if she was all right, but her response was uncertain as Poulos entered the car and asked. She said, "Are you okay?" John and Valentina conversed in English as the car was being driven, and the man asked if they were bilingual, to which he replied with a positive answer. Poulos remained silent and instead corresponded with Valentina on WhatsApp. Upon leaving about 4 a.m., the driver went to the nightclub with the couple and then forgot about the incident until he was informed of the young woman's death several days later. Due to Valentina's open WhatsApp session, her friend who lived in Cartagena came to the prosecutor office in Bogota and surrendered their computer with the chats providing clues about what had occurred. One of the pieces of evidence found in Valentina's chat was that her friend had spotted a suitcase with her body, which was said to have been there. The friend said that on the same day Valentina was in Bogota, she got a text from Poulos and received several selfies with his luggage. The suitcase that John brought with him was akin to the one found by authorities in the container. The color was indistinguishable. There's no clear answer as to why the young girl left her WhatsApp session open on her friend's computer, but all of these texts helped authorities get what happened that night when Valentina was killed. It was determined by forensic investigators that she died from asphyxiation caused by tightly strangled with a rope. Prior to her passing, there were indications on her body that she had been a victim of violence. All indications from the forensic examination indicate that Valentina Tres Palacios passed away while sleeping. This conclusion was drawn up by criminalists because she was wearing pajamas. There was no doubt in the evidence above that John Poulos was present. The indictment stated that the suspect did not acknowledge responsibility for the girl's death, citing the current situation and the concealment of evidence. Rather, he said, there were violations when I was arrested in Panama because we did not have a lawyer to talk to. Poulos' Spanish language skills were not strong enough to warrant a translator, and the hearing lasted for more than 5 hours. The crime committed by Poulos is attributed to his involvement with Valentina, and he attempted to disappear without trace, erasing his social media accounts after the incident. On May 19, 1987, John Poulos was born in Wisconsin, United States. He had 3 children and was previously wedded in his native land. His criminal record included charges of violence against women, including obtaining a restraining order against his ex-wife. The use of pornographic websites was reported by a woman to whom John Poulos had sent money, who claimed that this person was actively browsing. According to her, he spent approximately 5-6 hours daily on the site, and she mentioned that despite being a man, his behavior was often bizarre in nature, such as fantasizing and recounting ghost stories. Another model who testified on a modeling page said she knew the American from Texas, America. She ceased writing to him after a peculiar comment he made, which included the words, jealousy and death. John's question was, if I were at a bar, would you be willing to talk to me? The girl refused in response. It's likely that one of us will die due to jealousy, replied Poulos. The witness stated that despite the subject having sent money to the magical lord, she never conversed with him on video because his communication was often unusual. It is important to acknowledge that John had certain conduct towards his victims. He contacted Valentina on social media and started sending her money with persistence and consistency in the case. This approach to women's treatment as property was a warning sign that the trusting women initially neglected and Poulos believed he could purchase them with money from the outset. The factors were disregarded, leading to the possibility that the victim unintentionally stumbled into her abuser's trap and was eventually recognized due to his own mistake. The authorities involved in this case are assuming that John thought the waste disposal system in Colombia was equivalent to that in the United States, where he resided. According to him, the waste material had settled in the container and would eventually be disposed of. Poulos did not assume that recycling workers and street dwellers frequently sift through garbage to discover items that can be sold or employed as something. John Poulos is being held in a private cell in Bogotá today. Now all that remains is to demonstrate that all these pieces of evidence connect the individual to the crime and to discover the motive behind this dreadful murder. In Colombia, the criminal code provides for a prison sentence of up to 50 years for a crime in which an American is accused, with the assistance of a special group formed by the Capitol Police in coordination with the country's Attorney General's office. Criminal investigators will be engaged in the search for material evidence to clarify this fact. Such cases once again demonstrate to us how dangerous social networks can be when getting to know someone. Valentina thought she had found love and someone with whom she would spend the rest of her days. However, this did not happen, and like many people in the world, she too thought that nothing like this would happen to her. Chapter 1. Harold Sasko. Harold Sasko, better known as Hal, lived in Kansas City. He was born on September 11, 1961 in Titusville, Florida, and was one of 12 children in the family. His siblings described Harold as a person who was ready to take responsibility in almost any situation. He often helped his brothers and sisters with household chores and was generally very organized. So it was not surprising that after graduating from college, Hal opened his own pizzeria. And just 2 years later, he expanded his business by starting a second restaurant. This led to his move to Lawrence in late 1990 with his then-wife, Anna, and their 3-year-old daughter, Mendez. There, not far away in the city of Topeka, Hal opened a third restaurant. Harold became dependent on his business, and his hard work and lifestyle focused solely on work did not suit his wife. After all, Hal was not only a business owner, but also a husband and father, so his wife and child deserved his attention. Eventually, this led to a serious rift between the couple, and when his wife could no longer endure the lonely life, they decided to divorce. Hal was considered a church parishioner, and he was proud of being not only a man of God, but also a respected member of the community. Those around him knew him as a kind, caring, and extremely organized manager. So it came as a real shock to the community when on January 17, 2014, their so-called good and caring manager suddenly disappeared. Chapter 2. Harold's disappearance. The day began like any other Friday. The weekend was just around the corner, and many people went to work to carry out their daily duties. Of course, this day was no exception for the pizzeria employees. The problem was that when they arrived at work, they found themselves in a quiet and empty restaurant. Usually, Hal was there to unlock the kitchen, but this time he was nowhere to be seen. Even stranger was the fact that it had been several days since anyone had heard from him. Concerned about his well-being, the employees called the police and demanded a welfare check at his home on West 26th Street. Later that day, a police officer was sent to his residence. When he knocked on the front door, he was met with silence. When he knocked on the front window of the house, he also received no response. The officer then looked inside to see if anyone was home, and it was at that moment that he saw the figure of a man lying face down on the floor. Calling for backup, law enforcement officials burst into the house. It was confirmed that the man on the floor was Hal, and moreover, he was lying in a pool of his own blood. It immediately became apparent that he was already gagged, and judging by the condition of his body, he had been dead for several days. Moreover, it was not an accident. His hands were tied behind his back with zip ties, which were used to keep him under control. Hal's legs were also tied, but the most horrifying detail was that his throat was cut so deeply that the boning side was shattered. With such a serious and brutal wound, he had no chance of survival. The officers were faced with an extremely gruesome scene. To top it all off, the police found several empty bottles at the other end of the room, as well as a phone and laptop that did not belong to Hal. They also noticed the absence of Hal's car in the driveway, but the strangest piece of evidence left at the crime scene was the word freedom sloppily written on the wall in Hal's blood. Chapter 3. The investigation. The sudden influx of officers in the area undoubtedly drew increased attention from curious neighbors. The police decided to use this to their advantage and began asking more questions. That's how they learned that Harold was not living alone. His neighbors claimed that he was living with a girl he called his stepdaughter. This information turned out to be very important for the officers. Now they knew that there was a person who not only knew Harold well and was in constant contact with him, but was also present at the crime scene. Eventually, it was established that the so-called stepdaughter was 18-year-old Sarah Gonzalez McClain, who had been living with him for the last 2 years of his life. However, a problem arose. Sarah was nowhere to be found. This, of course, greatly concerned the officers. Finding Sarah became a top priority for law enforcement, as they had no idea what exactly had happened to her. She could have been abducted, become a victim, a witness, a suspect, or perhaps none of the above. In any case, it was now absolutely necessary to find her. Family members and friends were informed about this horrific crime, and 3 weeks later, on February 8th, a funeral was planned in memory of the lost community member. The public was urged to contact Douglas County forensic investigators and provide any information about Sarah's whereabouts. A reward of $1,000 was announced for any useful information. Chapter 4. Sarah's background. Sarah Gonzalez McClain was born on July 9, 1994, in Topeka, Kansas. She grew up in a loving family of 5. She had a brother and a sister. Throughout her childhood, Sarah was known as a shy but kind child. Since she was homeschooled for many years, she had few friends outside her neighborhood. However, this does not mean that she had a bad upbringing. Her parents were wonderful people, and she was always close to her sister. Unfortunately, when Sarah was a teenager, her parents eventually decided to divorce, which significantly affected her at such a vulnerable age. After her parents' divorce, her childhood and adolescence unfortunately only worsened. Sarah was quite naive, having been sheltered from the outside world by her parents. And unfortunately, people who are ready to take advantage of such a situation are always around. After her parents' divorce, Sarah experienced inappropriate behavior from a neighbor, and unfortunately, he eventually abused her. This event greatly influenced Sarah's character and behavior. She began to act completely differently than before. Much to her mother's dismay, Sarah began sneaking out of the house at night and hanging out with the wrong crowd. Even worse, this led to her frequent use of illicit substances and alcohol to drown out her suffering. It seemed that after her parents' divorce, Sarah no longer wanted to stay in her family home. That's when the pizzeria hired her. At first, he seemed like an ordinary, kind manager, but there were rumors among the staff that he was not quite what he appeared to be. For example, Hal told all the restaurant managers that they could only hire young, attractive women. While working at the pizzeria, Sarah would wake up, go to work, spend time there, and eventually return home to her family. She often spent nights drinking before returning home. According to some reports, she was only sober at work, if you could call it that. Despite the fact that she often came in drunk and nearly got fired several times over those few months, she somehow managed to keep her job. That's because Hal seemed to feel sorry for her. He knew that she was vulnerable and needed extra support. She tragically experienced another traumatic event. One such evening, another man attacked her, and to top it all off, this scumbag even burned her with cigarettes. After that, Sarah's already fragile mental health completely crumbled. She stopped going to work, lost friends, and sank into a very dark state. And then, she attempted to take her own life. Fortunately, Sarah's family found her in time to call an ambulance. She fully recovered, but it was only after the girl spent 5 months in the hospital. The nicest thing was that after being discharged from the hospital, Sarah received support from loved ones and friends. But one of these messages of support stood out in particular. It was from her former boss, Hal. After her tragic ordeal, Hal offered to become her personal life coach, or even a kind of guardian. He could pick her up, take her somewhere to eat, and even let her express everything that was on her mind. Since there was no one else to turn to, Sarah eventually enlisted his support. It was during one of these walks that she told him her entire story, including her tragic encounters with other men, drinking, and everything else. Now Hal knew that she wanted to leave her family home, and upon learning about the traumas she had experienced, he suggested that she live with him in his own house. It all seemed a bit dubious. The problem was that Sarah was vulnerable, lost, and hurt. Hal's offer gave her a way out of it all. After moving in with Hal, everything seemed to stabilize for a short time. She found a new job far away from the pizzeria. Hal took great care of her, her dog moved in with her, and she even considered college. But Sarah's mother was unhappy with the whole situation. She found Hal quite strange, and the whole story seemed very suspicious to her. Every time she tried to talk to Sarah about it, it always ended in a big fight, which of course further alienated her daughter. Michelle didn't believe that Hal's intentions were always as innocent as he made them out to be. Even worse, she believed that her daughter was most likely too naive and prone to illusions to realize it. After the divorce, Sarah's father broke off all contact, and now she was trying to fill the void that had formed. To make the situation even more eerie, Hal eventually asked Sarah to call him Gad, and then he told all the neighbors that she was his stepdaughter. It's not surprising that Sarah's colleagues eventually fobbed out about all this and inquired about her relationship with Hal. Now, when asked about it, Sarah insisted that he was just her friend and nothing more. But from an outsider's perspective, it was strange that a 50-year-old man brought an attractive but troubled 18-year-old girl into his home, and perhaps her peers suspected something. As soon as Sarah settled into the house and began to feel more comfortable, Hal started setting his own boundaries and attitudes towards life, especially when she turned 18. This change was quite alarming. Hal began buying her illegal drugs and alcohol, joking about them dating, and even brought up the topic of a sexual relationship with Sarah. In addition to these changes, he openly kept track of everything he bought for her, including alcohol, illegal drugs, cosmetics, and rent. He wanted her to feel indebted to him, and he also told her that she would only be able to leave once she paid him back. In fact, she felt so trapped that after she turned 18, she gave in to his advances, and her relationship with the man she once called Dad now became sexual. This diabolical situation lasted for a whole 10 months, and according to Sarah, they had sex several times a week. The only way she could cope was to drink and use illegal substances until she no longer felt involved in the situation. This, of course, further increased her debt to the man who was now using her body. On top of everything, Hal berated Sarah just as often as he complimented her. For example, he criticized her nose and then offered to pay for plastic surgery, which she, unsure of herself, eventually agreed to. It was clear that Hal treated her as his personal property, rather than as another human being with feelings. He also paid for her gum implantation, and his next goal was to buy her breast implants. Both of these surgeries cost $16,000, which of course was added to the bill, and she had to pay him back when she could afford it. She found herself trapped with no way out. In addition to this, Hal also threatened Sarah, telling her that he had connections if she ever tried to escape. From that moment on, her mental health deteriorated even further. In response, she was given antidepressants to cope with the situation, for which she would eventually have to pay again. Trapped by the mental trauma of abuse and depression, Sarah's mind became clouded. She repeatedly found herself on the brink, and now, after supposedly finding someone she could rely on, he too turned out to be an abuser. Sarah had absolutely had enough, and she began to act in a way that eventually turned the victim into a killer. After visiting a pet store, she bought a rabbit and signed a waiver before taking it home. That same evening, one of Hal's pizzeria managers was visiting the house for dinner and drinks. The manager was shocked when he opened the refrigerator and saw a rabbit carcass instead of beer. Sarah not only admitted that she was responsible for killing the pet rabbit, but also stated that it was not the first animal she had killed. Completely bewildered by the situation, the manager politely stayed for dinner, but then went home. This was a huge red flag and an indication of what Sarah was potentially capable of. Unfortunately, this sign was ignored. The main question remained whether Sarah was truly capable of killing a person. Although Sarah was initially considered missing, it was soon established that she was actually the prime suspect. Unfortunately, the detectives were not mistaken in their assumptions. They suspected that she had packed all her belongings, taken the dog, stolen Harold's car, and fled to Texas. However, along the way, she changed her plans and headed to Florida. It was warmer there, and the idea of admiring the ocean view seemed pleasant. Given this newly received information, she was officially declared a wanted person. Sarah was not only wanted on suspicion of murdering Hal, but also as mentally unwell and possibly dangerous to others. Her name was on the lips of many officers across the country, and this continued for 11 days. On January 25, 2014, after being on the run for just over a week and a half, Sarah McLean was finally found and arrested in Everglades National Park. Not surprisingly, the police officer found her in Hal's stolen car, sleeping next to a loaded gun. They also found $2,400 in cash, 2 more guns, an axe, and a couple of knives, one of which was stained with Harold's blood. Chapter 8. Sarah's trial. A few hours after her arrest, a 3-hour interrogation began, during which Sarah confessed to killing the man. According to her version of events, the story unfolded as follows. On January 14, 2014, Harold returned home after a long day at work. The sound system had recently broken down, and he decided to devote the evening to repairing it. He asked Sarah to bring him a beer, and then another, and another. After a few hours, fatigue took its toll, and Hal suddenly passed out on the floor. He didn't even suspect that Sarah had actually put a large amount of sleeping pills in one of his last bottles. By that point, she had already decided Hal had to die. She tied him up with zip ties, took a hunting knife, and then a few minutes later slit his throat. Shortly after that, Harold died in his sleep. Sarah then took a shower, listening to her favorite music, and washed all the blood off herself. After that, she called work to say that she would be out for a few days because, unfortunately, a relative had passed away. She then packed her things, including a photo of her sister, took the dog, and disappeared into the night in Hal's stolen car. To avoid being found, she left her cell phone and laptop at home. During the interrogation, Sarah openly shared her motives. She was locked in the house and in debt to a man who clearly wanted to possess her. She became his target, was abused, and then turned into his property. Anger clouded her thirst for revenge, and regardless of the consequences, revenge was exactly what she wanted. Sarah also expressed a strong desire to resort to violence. She admitted to killing rabbits out of curiosity. She also claimed that for 2 years, she had thoughts of violence and noticed that they were progressing. Obviously, Sarah's confession put her in a very difficult position. She not only confessed to killing Hal, but also to enduring violence. Given these horrific facts, it became absolutely clear that she would face trial. However, it was also clear that Sarah was undoubtedly mentally unwell, so first and foremost, she would have to undergo a psychological examination. In addition to her recently developed penchant for violence, she also claimed to have memory lapses and felt that she was an observer in her own mind. Not surprisingly, Sarah was eventually diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. In Sarah's mind, she was not just Sarah. She was also Vanessa, Alice, Neela, and the Nameless One. Alice was the weepy and vulnerable side of Sarah, while Vanessa was the strong militant fighter inside her. Neela was feminine, polite, and liked to please people. But of course, the saddest version of them was the Nameless One, who took on all the consequences of the trauma and depression. Chapter 9. Sarah's sentence. When it came to Sarah's trial, her dissociative identity disorder was the main line of defense. She claimed that a girl named Alice wanted to take her own life, but the other personalities convinced her not to. After careful discussion among themselves, they decided that the only way out was to kill Harold. In a clearer and healthier world, Sarah's defense team argued that she was in a state of clinical dissociation when she committed her crime. The abuse Sarah endured living with Harold is alarming. However, it was ultimately deemed irrelevant, as everything was consensual. From an investigative point of view, this was not compelling evidence. The defense itself also could not be persuasive, as the murder was clearly intentional. Unfortunately for Sarah, although her mental disorder was recognized as genuine, her defense failed to convince the judges, and she was ultimately found guilty of murdering Harold Sasko. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 50 years. This greatly shocked both Sarah and her family. It became apparent that the abuse she had endured throughout her life and her mental state at the time of the murder were not taken into account when sentencing her, which means that her punishment was much harsher than she deserved. Sarah filed an appeal on the grounds that the abuse she suffered should have been considered during the trial. Unfortunately, by that time, more evidence of Harold's horrible behavior had been uncovered. After analyzing his computers, detectives found that they were literally riddled with illegal pornography. In addition, another woman, whose name remains unknown, claimed that Hal had hit on both of her daughters. Given all this new evidence, Sarah's appeal resulted in a 50% reduction in her sentence to 25 years. To this day, she still remains behind bars, and that's because although the judge concluded that Hal did indeed abuse his control over Sarah, it doesn't negate the fact that she still committed premeditated murder. Chapter 10. Conclusion. Sarah was initially a victim. Harold was a cruel manipulator of young women, and did a very good job of deceiving many people in his community. However, some still remember him as an extremely generous person. Harold also had good sides. For example, he was known to have helped many employees get out of financial crisis, and whenever someone needed advice, he was always ready to help. Harold's family does not deny his shameful actions, but they testify to his positive character. He clearly needed help and did wrong, but he never deserved to die. Although Sarah's family agrees that she must be punished for her crimes, they also believe that the sentence was too harsh for someone trying to escape her abuser. Harold was undoubtedly a favorite of many people, but at the same time, he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. This story is an example of how life circumstances, trauma, and a lack of proper support can lead to tragic consequences. Sarah became a victim of abuse by someone she trusted, and it caused irreparable damage to her mental health. However, this does not justify her actions, the deliberate murder of another human being. This story also demonstrates how important it is to be attentive to those around us, and to be able to recognize warning signs. Perhaps if someone had intervened earlier, the tragedy could have been avoided. At the same time, this story raises questions about the fairness of the justice system. Was Sarah's punishment adequate, given all the circumstances? Was her mental state and the trauma she suffered sufficiently taken into account? These questions remain open for discussion. Ultimately, this story serves as a reminder that a completely different personality can be hiding behind a person's appearance. Harold, who many considered kind and generous, actually turned out to be a manipulator and a predator. This story prompts us to be careful in our judgments of others. Corey Day Desmond was born March 18, 1980 at Torrance Memorial Hospital, and right from the start, she was the center of attention because she had to fight to survive. Due to a hole in her diaphragm, she had to undergo multiple surgeries. She was only given a 20% chance of survival, and miraculously, she not only survived, but she thrived. Friends and family of Desmond knew her as a smart, self-confident young woman, unafraid to express her opinion, who was energetic and full of affection for those she cared about, who were many. Desmond graduated from North Torrance High School and earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. Unsure of her calling in life, she changed her mind and decided to become a teacher. Her goal was to teach autistic children. A week after her death, a notice came in the mail that she had earned her teaching credential. She was loved by many and friends to all. She was sweet at times, but could be tough as nails. She could command a bar full of patrons when she wanted, and all the while be singing one of her favorite karaoke songs, such as Black Velvet, or These Boots Were Made for Walking, and once again, being the center of attention. It was that secondary family that Corey acquired while working in those various establishments that kept her going back despite what her family wanted her to do. In 2009, Corey worked in a bar. On Saturday, February 14th, she had a shift that ended at 9:30 p.m. She then walked 2 blocks to the popular bar Street Lounge. Many employees of this bar knew Corey as she had friends working there. She was caught on surveillance cameras helping her friends at the bar. She left there only after closing, around 2 a.m. None of her friends saw her after that. On Monday, February 16th, at approximately 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a terrifying call. About 100 miles from the bar where people last saw Corey, the driver stopped to take snow chains off the wheels. The man felt a strong, unpleasant smell as soon as he exited the car. He thought the source of the stench was an animal that got hit by a car, but still decided to check. Not far from the car, he found something strange. He saw a black plastic garbage bag with a woman's body inside. The man ran out into the road in a panic, stopping cars and asking to call the police as his phone's battery was dead. They identified the victim by fingerprints and driver's license. It was 28-year-old Corey Dee Desmond. Subjected to a brutal attack, the woman died from strangulation. She had a lot of bruises on her face and neck and injuries to the back of her head. Corey tried to fight back as she had several defense wounds. Although unable to determine the exact time of death, the medical experts said Corey was on the street for about 36 hours before the man found her. Corey's pants were unbuttoned and pulled to her knees, but no signs of intimate contact were found. The first conclusion that investigators came to was that the place where the driver found Corey's body was not the place of her death. The criminal left her body by the side of the road, hoping it would take time to find it. Before the man found her body, the rain destroyed all possible evidence. Reporting bad news to the families of the dead or missing is perhaps the hardest thing in the work of a policeman. At that time, Corey was living with her grandmother. The news about the granddaughter's body found in a garbage bag shocked the woman, and this news was no less devastating for Mark, Corey's father. Mark knew perfectly well how the system worked. Sometimes the police delay the investigation for many months because they need a warrant to conduct searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. There are cases when the time-consuming bureaucracy slows down the process of solving a crime. Therefore, Mark decided not to sit and wait for the police to find the person who deprived him of his daughter. He decided to act. He said love for his daughter gave him the strength to look for the criminal. Mark found Corey's Jeep Wrangler in an alley next to the bar where she worked. He also discovered that Corey disappeared on the night of February 15th, but unfortunately, no one knew about it. Grandma did not panic because Corey was already an adult and could stay overnight with a friend or friends. In addition, she often worked late into the night and came home when her grandmother was already asleep. Investigators went to the bar where Desmond worked to find possible witnesses or leads. They talked to other employees and learned that Corey finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then went to another bar. She often did that. Her friends worked at that bar, and Corey often visited them at the end of her shift. She helped at the bar or chatted with friends while sitting at the counter. Besides, it brought her extra tips. Bar visitors knew her face well, and many perceived Corey as another employee. Surveillance cameras confirmed the words of the visitors. They captured the girl helping her friends at the bar. Unfortunately, a bartender's job is not only to pour drinks and entertain the interlocutors. Sometimes, after drinking alcohol, some people stop controlling their emotions and their behavior becomes inappropriate. That evening, Corey was unlucky enough to meet such a person. According to eyewitnesses, she argued with some man who behaved provocatively. He bothered women and unceremoniously touched them, making unflattering compliments. While everyone was silent and did not dare to put this man in his place, Corey stood up for the bar's visitors. In other words, the girl explained to the man that he was not welcome there. The violent guest was furious but still agreed to leave. Corey continued to help her friends and made drinks at the bar as if nothing had happened. That evening she consumed alcohol, but it did not affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., she left the bar alone and planned to go home. But as we now know, a man found Corey's lifeless body 100 miles from the bar the next day. Mark gave the police all the information he could find. Through television, he appealed to everyone to report any crucial information for the investigation. Meanwhile, the police identified the man Corey quarreled with before her death. During a conversation with investigators, the man said he did not know who Corey Desmond was. However, he did not deny having a big fight with the girl in a bar on February 14th. The man said alcohol made him uncontrollable, confirming that they kicked him out of the bar. Right after that, he went home to sleep. The suspect denied any involvement in the crime. He agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. They carefully examined the suspect's car. After all, there could have been traces like blood stains, hair, or something belonging to Corey. The car was dirty both inside and outside, and yet forensic experts did not find any evidence there. While searching the man's house, they found nothing indicating his involvement in the crime. The last hope of the investigators to catch the man in a lie was a polygraph test. But the man passed it without much difficulty, answering all the questions of the police. In addition, his wife confirmed that he came home before 2 a.m. and immediately went to bed. Corey left the bar around 2 a.m., which means this man was not involved in her death. Thus, the police excluded him from the list of suspects. But the problem was that they had no other persons of interest in this investigation. They studied Corey's personal life, trying to find out if she had enemies who could wish her harm. Investigators found out another strange detail. The owner of the bar where Corey worked said that night, she came and asked for permission to use the toilet. But since the bar was closed, he refused the girl's request and advised her to go home. It was about 2:20 in the morning. What happened next remained a mystery because Corey never got in the car and did not go home. Investigators assumed that she had been abducted or assaulted near her place of work. However, the bar's surveillance cameras did not record this, and there were no witnesses on the street at such a late hour. At the time of Corey's death, her blood alcohol content was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving. It was unclear whether she planned to use her car or was looking for other ways to get home. Unfortunately, she did not meet anyone who would help her that night. A month later, the investigation reached a dead end. The police checked all the versions and clues, but found no new suspects. Corey's father, Mark, wasn't going to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Artesia Boulevard in Redondo Beach. The billboards contained a photo of his daughter with the question, "Who killed Corey Day Desmond?" The man offered a $15,000 reward for any information helpful to the police. "I'm going to keep them up there to let people know the guy is still out there," Mark Desmond said. "Maybe it will save somebody." To some extent, this story is similar to the one of Alexander Kemp. The latter's father, Roger, did everything to find the criminal, and billboards played a crucial role in solving the crime. If you haven't watched this story yet, click on the link at the end of this video. Information about Corey periodically appeared on 50 electronic billboards. Eventually, it brought results. In May 2009, the phone rang at the police station. A woman named Tiffany saw one of the billboards with a photo of Corey. Thanks to this woman, the police were able to solve this case. Tiffany spoke very quietly. The woman was experiencing stress and severe fright. She rambled as if she didn't know where to start. Then she finally focused and said, "Hello, my name is Tiffany. I think my boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, killed that bartender girl, Corey Day Desmond. Please check him. He's behaving strangely, but I'll tell you more when we meet." Tiffany called several times to arrange a meeting with the detective. During their conversation in the park, the woman told him about her suspicions. According to her, on February 14th, she and Tony planned a romantic Valentine's Day dinner. She spent the whole evening preparing for a date. Tiffany took the children to their grandparents, visited a beauty salon, and bought a new red dress. Tony loved it when she wore red clothes. It drove him crazy. The guy was working that day, but had to return home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited for Tony almost all night. The woman tried to contact him, but he did not answer calls and messages. Tony returned home at 4:30 in the morning and, as if nothing had happened, said he was too drunk to go home. He said he fell asleep in his car. Tiffany mentioned that Tony rarely cleaned the interior of his car. However, after a few days, he bought a whole set of cleaning products. He washed the car thoroughly, not letting her help. The guy's behavior seemed strange, but at that moment, she did not attach much importance to it. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for almost nothing and bought another car. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. A little later, they had a joint trip to Big Bear Lake. They chatted along the way, and everything seemed normal until Tony suddenly stopped the car on the side of the road. He turned to Tiffany and asked her, "Do you think this dead girl, what was her name, the bartender, was dumped here? I'm almost 100% sure that the police found her body here." Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany lived together for about 4 years. They had a 6-year-old son together, but they never married. He was a hard-working man and got along well with everyone. He has never had any problems with the law. Perez came from a large family with 8 siblings. His parents grew up in the LA area, and Perez attended high school in Manhattan Beach. Tony's absence on the day of Corey's death, cleaning the car and urgently selling it, a strange trip, and an equally strange comment about where the police found her body, a change of phone number, and odd behavior. Putting all these facts together, Tiffany realized that Tony could be the one who took the life of Corey Desmond. She didn't want to believe it. The investigators decided to talk to Tony and went to his house. To prevent him from suspecting anything, Tiffany agreed to play along with the police, not telling him anything about this conversation. It looked as if they were conducting a routine interview of people to find witnesses in the Corey Desmond case. Tony looked calm, like a person with nothing to hide. He wasn't nervous while answering all the questions. He said he didn't know her, mentioning he had only seen Corey in the newspapers. However, to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for taking the life of Corey, they needed hard evidence. Thus, the police found the new owner of the Dodge that Tony sold shortly after the news of Corey's death. The new owner confirmed that Tony sold him his car for a low price. He allowed the police to check the vehicle for any evidence. Tiffany said Tony cleaned the interior thoroughly before selling his car. However, when the experts applied luminol and used an ultraviolet lamp, it became evident why Tony Lopez Perez got rid of his car. The interior of the car lit up in bright blue. The police asked Tony to come to the police station. They didn't tell him anything about the find, so he wouldn't run away. At first, he claimed he had never seen Corey, but later changed his testimony, saying he saw her near the bar and whistled at her. As soon as the police noticed that the man was changing his testimony, they showed him photos of the car he had sold and said that they had found crucial evidence there. This time, Tony claimed to have seen Corey outside the bar. Standing under a street lamp, she suddenly lost consciousness and fell on the sidewalk. He tried to help her, but she did not regain consciousness. Then he started slapping Corey on the cheeks. Corey opened her eyes and started screaming. She told him to get out and asked him to let her go. According to Tony, he got scared, put his hands over her mouth, and accidentally strangled her. Fearing he would get blamed for Corey's death, he put her body in the back seat of his car and drove home. Perez said he woke up during the night and went outside to see if it was a nightmare. I opened the door, and it was not a nightmare, Perez told detectives. It was true. Perez said he went back inside and tried to get some sleep. In the morning, he went to work with Desmond's body still in the back seat. At the end of the working day, he placed her body in 2 garbage bags, took it to a remote area, and left it next to the side of the road. According to Tony's story, what he did to Corey was an accident. He claimed that he was drunk and scared. He accidentally strangled her in a state of panic, but Corey's injuries suggested otherwise. She had severe injuries on the back of her head, bruises on her face and neck, and defense wounds on her hands. Moreover, Corey's pants were down to her knees. Tony Perez was arrested and charged with first-degree deprivation of life. The next day, he showed the police where he dumped Corey's body. In addition to Tony's confession, they now had the results of DNA tests. Corey's blood matched the blood found in the car that Tony sold immediately after committing the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheridan testified to the multiple contusions to the victim's head, the evidence of strangulation, and the blunt force trauma to her face. Sheridan also said she had scratches on her body that suggested the criminal dragged her after her death. Based on Corey's injuries, prosecutors said Perez assaulted her and tried to force her into intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. Corey resisted. Unable to get what he wanted, Perez strangled her. Tiffany Ware testified during the trial. She told the San Bernardino County jury that her former boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009. Even though they were making love almost every day, Ware said Perez was still not satisfied. Tiffany also told the court that Tony had twice engaged in intimacy with her against her will. It happened after the birth of their son, and with an interval of about a month. Both incidents occurred when she was fast asleep on the couch after taking painkillers due to severe back pain. Perez, who chose not to testify at the trial, made his first statements to the court during his sentencing. He said he was taught to love and respect those around him, but that he veered off course at times. I forgot the key lessons I was taught about in life, which make me a man, a father, a loving uncle to many, and a responsible person who supports his family that I so love, Perez said. In the end, I fell short. He generally stuck to the story his attorney Andrew Hennell presented at the trial, that he was scared and didn't mean to hurt Desmond. Hennell argued to a jury of 6 men and 6 women that Perez found her passed out on the sidewalk. He said he tried to calm her down and didn't mean to kill her. I should have thought before acting, Perez said. I should have stepped back and cleared my head. Fear took over. I was so scared, so careless. Corey's father, Mark Desmond, said his daughter had a beautiful future ahead of her before her life was cut short at the age of 28. Tony Perez should live the rest of his miserable life knowing he killed his own children's hopes and dreams at the same time he was killing Corey, her father said. He embodies all the characteristics that women in society fear. Just before sentencing, Perez asked God and the court to show him mercy. My very deepest apologies to the Desmond family and to my own family. I have brought such hurt and sorrow to the Desmonds that will forever shape their life. I hope he never gets out in the street again, said Desmond's grandmother, Beverly. I hope he suffers as much as she suffered. In July 2011, a jury of 6 men and 6 women found 36-year-old Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree deprivation of life. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to parole after 25 years. Corey Desmond's family expressed gratitude to Tiffany Ware, thanks to whom the police solved this case. If it hadn't been for her, I don't think they would have ever found out it was him, said Leslie Schwab, a family friend who attended every day of the trial along with about a dozen others in San Bernardino County. On the afternoon of June 8, 2018, while navigating the waters near the Long Island Strait, a group of fishermen aboard a commercial vessel stumbled upon an unsettling sight. Bobbing in the waves was the lifeless form of a man. Drawing closer, they discerned unmistakable signs of distress on the body. Waste no time, they promptly alerted the Coast Guard to their grim discovery. Responding swiftly, law enforcement officials arrived at the scene to retrieve the body, revealing a young man with perplexing bruises and abrasions. Identified later as Spencer McFord, his disappearance alongside his girlfriend, Sophia McKenna, just days prior, had sent ripples of concern through the community. Ascertaining the circumstances surrounding Spencer's tragic end became paramount, prompting authorities to subject his remains to a thorough examination. The subsequent autopsy yielded the distressing conclusion of drowning as the cause of death. Yet, despite meticulous scrutiny, forensic experts uncovered no evidence of foul play. All injuries were deemed consistent with immersion in water. However, the revelation of Spencer's fate merely deepened the mystery surrounding the series of disappearances that befell the region that fateful weekend. 2 other men met similar tragic ends, their bodies discovered submerged in the waters. Initially dismissed as unfortunate accidents, these incidents raised troubling questions. Amidst the uncertainty, one haunting detail lingered: the absence of Sophia McKenna. Vanished without a trace, her fate intertwined with Spencer's in a narrative fraught with unanswered queries. This enigmatic saga unfurled on the ominous night of May 27, 2018, in the quaint town of Groan, nestled within Connecticut's northeastern expanse. Revered for its storied history and tales of spectral apparitions, the lighthouse bore witness to a tragedy that transcended mortal understanding. Legend spoke of Ernie, the lighthouse's inaugural keeper, whose love lost drove him to a fatal plunge from its heights. It was to this hallowed ground that Spencer and Sophia ventured, their fates entwined with the mysteries that shrouded the ancient structure. Ever since the rumors began circulating about strange happenings at the lighthouse, both locals and tourists alike have recounted peculiar occurrences. Reports range from doors and windows mysteriously opening, to bedsheets slipping off beds without any logical explanation. Sailors have recounted tales of radios switching on autonomously, and ships inexplicably becoming unmoored from the shore. These stories have propelled the lighthouse into the spotlight, featuring prominently in numerous television programs dedicated to the paranormal. Despite the speculative nature of these claims, the allure of the lighthouse's enigmatic atmosphere continues to draw people in. Spencer and Sophia were no exception. They had harbored a long-standing desire to explore the mysteries of this iconic landmark. Setting out on the eve of Memorial Day, they embarked on an adventure that would soon take a troubling turn. On Saturday the 27th, Sophia's friend Austin attempted to reach her, only to be met with silence. Initially unconcerned, he assumed she was simply sleeping in. However, as hours passed without any response, worry crept in. Contacting Sophia's mother, Michelle, Austin discovered a string of missed calls from an unfamiliar number on Michelle's phone. Upon attempting to return the calls, they reached Spencer's voicemail instead, sparking further concern. With anxiety mounting, Michelle and Austin sprang into action, scouring the area for any sign of their missing loved ones. Austin called local hospitals, while Michelle wasted no time in filing a missing persons report with the authorities. Meanwhile, Spencer's family shared in their apprehension, noting his absence from a family gathering and his failure to respond to their attempts at communication. Their search led them to Spencer's apartment, but it yielded no clues. Spencer's mother recalled their conversation at 10 p.m., hinting at his intentions to meet Sophia, despite previous plans. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place, the mystery surrounding their disappearance deepened, leaving both families grasping for answers in the darkness. When Spencer bid her goodnight, realizing something had happened, prompting his family to alert the authorities around 6:30 p.m. regarding his and his girlfriend's sudden disappearance. Swiftly, the police initiated their search for the missing duo. Austin reached out to the sheriff, disclosing crucial information about Sophia and Spencer's whereabouts the prior night, admitting his consent for Sophia's visit there. He elaborated on discovering a Snapchat video posted by Sophia, capturing moments aboard a boat en route to the lighthouse. The footage depicted a jovial scene, with Spencer rowing towards the destination. Subsequently, Sophia uploaded the video playfully posing by the lighthouse's concrete barrier, embellished with a "Do Not Cross" sign. The events following this snapshot remained shrouded in mystery. Mere minutes after the upload, at 2:05 a.m., Spencer's phone initiated a series of calls to Michelle, Sophia's mother, persisting at intervals of 2.06, 2.08, and culminating at 2.09. Michelle, deep in slumber, missed all calls, with no voicemails or texts left, and no record of contact with emergency services. The visual evidence confirmed the couple's presence at the lighthouse, prompting the dispatch of 20 Coast Guard units. A coordinated effort ensued, with the Coast Guard, firefighters, and police scouring the area by air, sea, and land. The first significant discovery was Sophia's abandoned car on the university campus, accompanied by her cell phone. Simultaneously, the Coast Guard recovered Spencer's t-shirt, as seen in the video, hinting at its use for securing the boat. The search persisted relentlessly through the night and into the following day. As the storm rolled in, state authorities made the difficult decision to halt the search for the missing young couple, Spencer and Sophia, until new leads or signs surfaced. This announcement sent shockwaves through their families and friends, who refused to give up hope. They took matters into their own hands, plastering the city with posters and spreading the word about Spencer and Sophia's disappearance. Their plea to the public for any information fell largely on deaf ears, despite the bustling streets at the time of their vanishing yielding no witnesses. In the midst of the family's relentless search efforts, questions swirled unanswered. Why did Sophia repeatedly call her mother, and why the hesitation to leave a voicemail or contact the authorities? Speculation ran rampant. Could their disappearance be tied to their recent brush with the law, having stolen a boat and ventured to the forbidden lighthouse? Sophia's prior legal entanglements and Spencer's DUI arrest might have fueled her reluctance to involve the police again. Perhaps she sought solace in reaching out to her mother instead, but the complexities of Sophia's state of mind at the time remain a mystery, clouded by panic and uncertainty. Meanwhile, detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the events of May 26, 2018. The day began like any other, bathed in sunshine and the promise of a festive weekend ahead. Memorial Day celebrations loomed, yet for Sophia and Spencer, the day took a sinister turn. Spencer's work shift ended at 7 p.m., after which their plans dissolved into a haze of uncertainty. Where did they go? Who did they meet? The details are scarce, save for Sophia's car found parked at the University of Connecticut campus around 2 a.m. For reasons unknown, Sophia left her cell phone in the car, whether due to forgetfulness or a drained battery. The couple embarked on their ill-fated journey aboard a small sailboat, its weight a mere 14 pounds, equipped only with oars. With Spencer's confidence in his aquatic abilities bolstering their resolve, they pushed off from shore, navigating perilously close to rocky outcrops en route to the infamous lighthouse. Their reckless disregard for safety, compounded by the absence of proper equipment, underscored the perilous nature of their venture. Monday evening brought a breakthrough in the search efforts when a police helicopter, scouring the coastline, spotted a white and blue sailboat wedged among the rocks, coated in a film of dust some 12 kilometers west of the lighthouse. While authorities suspected this vessel to be the missing sailboat from the campus, potentially used by Spencer and Sophia, conclusive evidence remained elusive. Fingerprints discovered on the boat offered tantalizing leads, yet their analysis and subsequent findings remained undisclosed to the public, shrouding the investigation in further ambiguity. Moreover, conflicting reports initially labeled the vessel as a kayak, only to later clarify it as a white sailboat adorned with red markings. In their quest for answers, investigators delved into the backgrounds of Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford. Born on March 7, 1996, in North Stonington, Connecticut, Sophia, then 21, resided in Groton, Connecticut, USA. Raised alongside her siblings, Justin and Grace, Sophia cherished her familial bonds, exhibiting a nurturing demeanor toward her younger kin. Despite her tumultuous upbringing, marked by her parents' divorce during her formative years, Sophia remained resilient, her vibrant spirit undimmed by adversity. Yet beneath her outward vivacity lay the lingering shadows of past trauma, shaping her life in profound ways. Throughout her high school years, Sophia grappled with a bipolar disorder diagnosis, leading to periods of depression interspersed with manic episodes. These mood swings, marked by intense shifts between euphoria and melancholy, often clouded her judgment and impacted her behavior. Though she diligently sought treatment, including medication and therapy, managing the symptoms proved challenging. Despite her efforts, there was no definitive cure for bipolar disorder, posing ongoing hurdles for Sophia and her family. The illness significantly disrupted her daily life, manifesting in unpredictable behavior and tumultuous relationships with those around her. In 2015, Sophia crossed paths with Austin, a vibrant individual whose charm captivated her instantly. Their ensuing 3-year relationship, however, proved tumultuous for Sophia and her mother, Michelle. Austin's volatile nature, fueled by his use of anabolic steroids, frequently led to heated arguments and even physical altercations, often initiated by Sophia due to her mental health struggles. Despite discovering Austin's infidelity and ending the relationship, Sophia continued to engage with him sporadically. Despite the challenges she faced, Sophia endeavored to forge ahead. Briefly delving into modeling for a local company provided a financial boost for her education. Eventually, she graduated as a massage therapist and secured a position at the Red Door, an upscale spa within a luxurious hotel. It was there that she met Spencer Mugford, her 20-year-old colleague. Spencer, hailing from Florida, shared Sophia's passion for the sea and boasted a promising future. Despite their mutual interests and undeniable connection, their relationship faced opposition from their respective families due to the frequent turmoil surrounding them. Michelle, Sophia's mother, expressed deep concern for Sophia's well-being due to her frequent meetings with Austin and their regular alcohol consumption, which had become almost daily. Despite Sophia and Spencer deciding to remain friends after their relationship ended, the exact reason remains unclear, though Sophia may have rekindled things with Austin. Despite this, Sophia and Spencer continued spending a lot of time together, both at work and outside, including their last day together. After fishermen discovered Spencer's body following days of searching, his family published an obituary in local media. Sophia's family did the same but continued searching, holding on to hope. They tried to recall the events leading to the disappearance, but no new information emerged. Uncertainty surrounded any additional calls from Spencer's phone beyond those to Michelle's number, as his phone was never recovered and the police didn't release cell operator records. Cameras at the lighthouse and campus were reportedly out of order, providing no video recordings of the events. It was also revealed that the lighthouse wasn't checked despite the couple's disappearance. In July 2018, Sophia McKenna's close relatives established a Facebook page titled Searching for Sophia McKenna to maintain public awareness of the case. The page facilitated the sharing of information, brochures, and pleas for any relevant details from the public. A peculiar incident occurred weeks after the disappearance, when Michelle received a money request from Sophia's social media account. Given that the police had Sophia's phone, this message raised suspicions of potential hacking. The inquiry into Spencer's demise and Sophia's vanishing reached a standstill. Official findings from the authorities remained inconclusive. Unofficially, various theories regarding the event circulated. Among them, one implicated Austin, Sophia's former beau, suggesting his potential involvement in the disappearance of the young pair. Speculation arose that Austin might have assaulted Sophia with assistance from his companions in disposing of Spencer. Their turbulent relationship, marked by frequent arguments and physical altercations, became a topic of public discourse. Michelle, Sophia's mother, bore witness to several of their conflicts. A month preceding the disappearance, significant turmoil erupted when Sophia uncovered Austin's infidelity on May 8, 2018, prompting the termination of their relationship. In what could have been an act of retribution or a fresh start, Sophia embarked on a relationship with another individual, bringing him to her residence. Austin, incensed, hurried to her abode, where neighbors observed him vehemently banging and kicking the door, hurling invectives at Sophia. After approximately 15 minutes of silence, assuming Austin had departed, Sophia opened the door, only to find him still there, attempting to force his way in. Fortunately, Sophia managed to swiftly shut the door. Neighbors overheard his threats to harm her if she didn't comply. By then, law enforcement and Michelle had arrived, and Austin was apprehended. The following day, May 9th, a restraining order was put into effect. In her testimony, Sophia recounted prior assaults by Austin and presented photographic evidence of her injuries. She expressed apprehension for her safety due to his stalking. The restraining order prohibited Austin from being in close proximity to Sophia. However, Sophia later experienced remorse, leading to a revision of the restrictions. Now, Austin was only forbidden from entering her residence. The individual accompanying Sophia at the time declined to divulge his identity and initially refused to cooperate with the authorities. Michelle initially asserted it was Spencer with Sophia, but later recanted her statement. Nonetheless, a trusted colleague of Sophia revealed the true identity of her companion. Colleagues of Sophia and Spencer confirmed their romantic involvement, behaving as a couple, both at work and in social settings. Witnesses also recounted an incident at a hotel where Austin, Sophia's ex, made a public threat against her. Nevertheless, Austin and his father joined in the search efforts for the missing duo, employing a private helicopter and distributing flyers featuring their images throughout the city. Austin took to social media, proclaiming Sophia as his girlfriend of 3 years and clarifying that her relationship with Spencer was purely platonic. This focus on their relationship, rather than her disappearance, struck many as peculiar. On July 10th, a memorial in Sophia's honor was arranged by her loved ones. Austin attended the gathering, accompanied by Michelle, and later shared a since-deleted post online. "Rest in peace, baby. We'll meet again soon." According to Austin's account to the authorities, he spent the entirety of May 26th with Sophia, even defying a court order to meet with her, and they had plans for the following day. A friend of Austin reported that around 3 a.m. on the night of the incident, Austin messaged Sophia, claiming to be at the gym with a friend, though the plausibility of this was questioned as gyms are typically closed at that time. Austin's family asserts he was at home before purportedly heading to the gym. An undisclosed witness mentioned Austin and his brother being invited to a party that day. While initially intending to go, Austin later cited fatigue and backed out. These discrepancies cast doubt on Austin's whereabouts during Sophia and Spencer's disappearance, leaving unanswered questions. Described as volatile, possibly exacerbated by alleged steroid use, Austin's acquaintances raised concerns about his temperament. There were speculations of Austin, his brother, and a friend having connections with the local police force. Additionally, rumors circulated about a family member of Austin being married to the police chief overseeing Sophia's case, with allegations of police misconduct against him. However, the credibility of these assertions, provided by a friend of Austin with a criminal history, remains dubious. Following the dissemination of a video on Sophia by a YouTube channel focused on Long Island disappearances, Austin swiftly purged all images of them together from his social media accounts. This action spurred bewilderment, particularly given Sophia's unresolved status. One conjecture posits that Austin sought to sidestep entanglements by showcasing a new romantic interest, although the wholesale eradication of Sophia-related content seemed peculiar. Moreover, Austin's dwindling involvement in the search mere days after Sophia's vanishing raised eyebrows. During interactions with investigators, he exuded a demeanor of tranquility, displaying no overt distress over the absence of a close acquaintance. However, such behavior alone does not warrant accusations against Austin, as individuals vary in their responses to stress. One line of thought proposes that Sophia met with foul play to prevent her testimony in a domestic violence case involving Austin. Her absence of testimony ultimately led to the dismissal of the case, mirroring events from the summer of 2018. Notably, Austin is not formally implicated in this speculation. It remains conjectural while the investigation persists. An alternative narrative contemplates the possibility that Sophia and Spencer encountered perilous individuals at the lighthouse. Despite the bustling holiday crowd, witnesses either failed to recall their presence or deemed the information insignificant, resulting in no police reports. Sophia's mother speculated about abduction or human trafficking, though no evidence or ransom demands substantiate these notions. Law enforcement also entertained the scenario of an accident stemming from reckless choices. The young couple embarked on an ill-equipped boat sans life jackets into turbulent currents. Upon reaching the lighthouse, they secured the boat with Spencer's t-shirt, documented their visit, only to realize the boat had drifted away, banking on Spencer's swimming proficiency. Spencer's misjudgment of the water's coldness might have been critical. The obscurity, often altering perceptions of distance, possibly misled him into believing the boat was nearer. Exhausted from his day's labor and the swim to the lighthouse, Spencer faced the peril of drowning. Upon realizing Spencer's absence, Sophia attempted to contact her mother for aid. In a state of desperation, she could have leaped in to rescue Spencer, risking her own life. Despite Sophia's lack of swimming prowess, the influence of alcohol might have driven her to an irrational decision. Another scenario suggests she might have been traversing the lighthouse's narrow ledge, searching for Spencer, only to trip, plummeting with her phone into the water, ultimately succumbing to the current. While these theories persist, they lack official validation and suspects, circulating primarily on social media. Sophia's loved ones persist in their quest for her, yearning for answers. In 2019, an independent detective stumbled upon bones near the shore, promptly alerting the authorities. Regrettably, the bones were dismissed as animal remains upon police inspection, foregoing forensic analysis due to cost constraints. Many facets of the case raise suspicions, warranting a thorough inquiry. The unresolved disappearance of Sophia, a cherished member of a grieving family, demands relentless search efforts. Though bodies of other missing persons have been found in these waters, Sophia's remains elusive. No fresh leads have emerged, leaving the enigma of that fateful night at the lighthouse unresolved. Before Paul met Joanne, he had been in serious relationships with women more than once. For example, in 1993, during his university years, he was with Carrie Thompson. Although he didn't stay with her for long, this relationship revealed his violent tendencies. Carrie told the police about how Paul could switch during an argument and become aggressive, beating the walls and holding Carrie by force. This was just the beginning. In 1999, Jenny Mary Clark appeared in his life. They wasted no time, and just 2 weeks after meeting, the wedding bells were already ringing. However, their marriage began with a real nightmare. On their wedding night, Paul attacked Jenny, and this was not a one-off incident. He continued to beat her and even strangled her into unconsciousness. Investigators claimed that this abusive behavior was repeated with Joanne. Despite this situation, Paul and Jenny decided to have a baby. Their daughter, Chloe, was born in 2000, and they divorced shortly after. When Chloe was 5 years old, Jenny met Joanne and immediately realized that Joanne was too naive for such a rude man and would face a tough battle with Paul. In 2002, he broke up with Jenny and began dating Joanne Nelson. Katie, Joanne's sister, said that Joanne most likely did not know about his criminal history. Otherwise, she would not have continued the relationship or wanted children with him. Their story began on the streets where Paul worked as a security guard in bars and clubs. He was 27 and already experienced in relationships, while Joanne was just starting her journey into adulthood at the age of 19. Despite the age difference, they found support in each other, running away from their parents' control and looking for their own space. At first, they lived with Paul's mother, and then they could afford to buy their own house. But happiness was slowly disappearing, fading away like smoke from a fire. The days turned gray, and the tension grew between them. For Joanne, everything had become too mundane and boring. Their differences began to affect the relationship. She loved order, while he did not give it much thought. On February 14, 2005, Joanne did not come to work. This was unusual and caused immediate concern. As the investigation revealed more and more information, the previously quiet and peaceful town was overtaken by a wave of shocking lies and deception. Joanne Nelson, a cheerful and bright young woman, always put the happiness of her loved ones above her own. As a child, she lived with her parents in the town of Hull, also known as Kingston upon Hull, on the east coast of Yorkshire, England. Her mother, Jean, was a teaching assistant, and her father, Charlie, worked as an engineer for the city council. It was in this town that Joanne grew up and became who she was. Joanne had a bright personality and was successful both academically and socially. She was an active athlete who loved netball, lacrosse, and swimming. She lived happily, enjoying her youth, but always harbored a deep desire to create her own family. She initially tried her hand at medicine, but the emotional toll of being a nurse proved too difficult for her. Her loved ones remember how she would come home saddened by the suffering of her patients. Later, Joanne considered working abroad, but ultimately chose to work at an employment center in Hull to be closer to her family and friends. She found fulfillment in making people's lives better by helping them find jobs and improve their skills. Joanne's dedication and kindness left a lasting impact on those around her, making her absence even more profound and alarming when she did not show up for work that fateful February day. On Valentine's Day 2005, Joanne Nelson vanished without a trace, turning a day meant for love into a day of horror and mystery. Her disappearance was a nightmare for her parents. When her boyfriend reported her missing to the police, a sense of foreboding filled the air. That night turned dark and ominous, leaving Joanne's family and friends enveloped in fear and uncertainty. Instead of enjoying the evening with his beloved, Paul found himself speaking with the police. He claimed that the last time he saw Joanne was when she was asleep, and upon his return from work, she was gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving only shadows of fear and hope behind. At 22 years old, Joanne's sudden disappearance caused great distress among her loved ones. The situation became even more perplexing when she missed significant events, such as her best friend's father's funeral and her sister Katie's 19th birthday. The police swiftly launched a large-scale search operation involving numerous law enforcement officers, military personnel, and volunteers. Joanne's father was vocal about his suspicions regarding Paul, questioning how he could be involved in the disappearance of such a responsible young woman. Katie, although aware of her father's concerns, found it hard to believe that Paul had any role in Joanne's vanishing. The family's worry and confusion only deepened as days turned into weeks without any sign of Joanne. Paul threw himself into the search efforts, collaborating with volunteers, concerned relatives, and friends. Despite lacking family consent, he granted multiple interviews to the press, keen to aid in the search. When questioned by a reporter over the phone, Paul vehemently denied any wrongdoing in Joanne's disappearance. He adamantly professed his love for her, asserting that he could never harm her. However, discrepancies emerged between his spoken words and his facial expressions. Expert Cliff Lansley scrutinized Paul's demeanor during a televised interview, identifying peculiarities. Notably, Paul failed to close his eyes while discussing Joanne, an anomaly for someone grappling with grief. Moreover, he displayed no signs of tears, raising suspicions. Further scrutiny came from Ray Higgins, the head of the investigation team at Humberside Police. Higgins reported observing nail marks on the back of Paul's hand, leading authorities to consider his potential involvement in Joanne's disappearance or death. Eventually, Paul's mother, unable to bear the emotional turmoil any longer, divulged crucial information about Paul's actions to the authorities, potentially shedding light on Joanne's fate. Upon learning of the accusations, Paul didn't attempt to refute his culpability. Just 6 days after Joanne's disappearance, he found himself in police custody. During a grueling interrogation, the truth emerged. On that fateful Valentine's Day in 2005, Paul committed the unthinkable act of ending Joanne's life in their own home. Paul recounted a tumultuous argument that escalated to irreparable heights. Joanne's constant criticism, particularly regarding household chores, served as the catalyst. According to Paul, Joanne's request for help with the washing machine triggered his anger and shame at his perceived inadequacy. Matters worsened when Joanne declared her intention to leave him and demanded the sale of their home for €110,000, further fueling Paul's rage. In a fit of fury, Paul confessed to the police, admitting to strangling Joanne with his bare hands. Subsequently, he displayed chilling composure as he meticulously orchestrated the aftermath, intending to conceal his heinous deed. He craftily devised a plan, seeking to fabricate Joanne's sudden disappearance. With calculated precision, Paul proceeded to carry out his scheme. He engaged in casual interactions with neighbors and discussed banal topics, like acquiring a pet, all while concealing the darkness within him. Surveillance footage captured his unnervingly composed demeanor as he purchased supplies, a testament to his disturbingly calm facade. Armed with garbage bags, rubber gloves, and disinfectant spray, Paul executed his plan methodically. He bound Joanne's limbs, encased her in bags, and sealed them with duct tape. Then, without hesitation, he transported her lifeless body to her vehicle, his audacity matched only by the magnitude of his crime. The audacious act unfolded in broad daylight, revealing Paul's cunning and deceitful nature. With chilling composure, he concealed his heinous deed from unsuspecting onlookers, demonstrating his ability to manipulate those around him effortlessly. After concealing Joanne's lifeless body in her own vehicle, Paul embarked on a calculated journey. Driving approximately 75 miles to the remote Bradbury woodland near Winteringham in North Yorkshire, Paul carefully orchestrated each step. With meticulous precision, he carried Joanne's body through the dense forest, seeking a secluded burial site among the towering pines. Utilizing twigs to obscure the makeshift grave, Paul buried what he perceived as the love of his life. Returning to the victim's car, Paul resumed his facade of normalcy, showing no remorse or acknowledgement of his monstrous actions. He even fabricated a fake phone conversation with Joanne to divert suspicion, further highlighting his cold-blooded demeanor. Despite his attempts to deceive, Paul's consistent actions betrayed an alarming level of planning and premeditation. In the subsequent investigation, Paul's memory conveniently faltered regarding the exact location of Joanne's burial site. Detectives, led by the tenacious Ray Higgins, embarked on a painstaking 6-week search across 3 counties. Finally, on March 24th, after 39 days of agonizing uncertainty, the grim truth came to light. In a solemn operation led by Detective Phil Gadd, Joanne's remains were discovered in Bransby near York. Trembling with nerves, the search party followed Paul's descriptions until they stumbled upon the telltale signs, a garbage bag concealed beneath branches. Within it lay the heartbreaking evidence, Joanne's body, wrapped in plastic, a tragic confirmation of the family's worst fears. March 24th marked the end of a harrowing ordeal for Joanne's family, bringing closure to their anguished search while cementing the grim reality they had dreaded all along. Paul's facade of strength hid a dark history of sexual violence against women, a chilling truth kept hidden from Joanne's family and the public until the trial. During his time working as a security guard at the club, he ominously referred to himself as a psychopath, sending shivers down the spines of those who knew him. Witnesses familiar with Paul from the gym recounted instances where he instigated fights in clubs and bars, painting a disturbing picture of his character. As the trial unfolded, more unsettling details emerged. It was revealed that Paul had been experimenting with steroids in a misguided attempt to sculpt his physique into that of a bodybuilder. His friends disclosed that he had battled alcoholism in the past, and his violent outbursts were likely exacerbated by his steroid use. Paul's educational background provided little insight into the darkness lurking beneath his seemingly ordinary facade. He attended Sydney Smith School before enrolling at Howe College, where he successfully completed a program in constructional engineering. Despite his academic achievements, Paul's journey took a sinister turn when he pursued a degree in horticulture at Bishop Burton College, completing it at the tender age of 17. These revelations painted a chilling portrait of a man whose outward appearance belied the deep-seated demons lurking within. Paul's transformation from a seemingly ordinary student to a perpetrator of unspeakable violence left Joanne's family and the community reeling, grappling with the horrifying reality of the darkness that dwelled within him. Paul's journey through life took him from Saudi Arabia to Somerton Road, where he worked diligently in various industries alongside his father, Peter Dyson. Together, they navigated the maintenance industry, honed their gardening skills, and delved into the intricacies of machining. Paul's employment history painted a picture of a young man eager to carve out his path in the world of work. However, behind the veneer of normalcy lurked a disturbing truth. At the tender age of 15, Paul's life took a dark turn when he crossed paths with Colin Allen, a martial arts expert with whom he formed an unlikely bond. It was to Colin that Paul confessed to a heinous crime, a confession that ultimately led to his arrest. Paul's acquaintances shed light on his complex character. While some saw him as charming and attractive to women, others witnessed a more troubling side to his personality. He often leveraged his position as a security guard to forge connections with women from higher social echelons, revealing a distorted perception of himself and his interactions. Colleagues and relatives offered contrasting portraits of Paul, depicting him as both outspoken and boastful about his athletic prowess, yet also capable of making disturbing statements. Shockingly, Paul's family recounted instances where he proudly boasted about his father's involvement in the deaths of 2 individuals. This seemingly incredulous claim, however, proved to be rooted in reality. Paul's father, Peter Dyson, had indeed served time in prison for the manslaughter of 22-year-old John Dickinson, a man with whom his wife had been unfaithful. The tragic events of 1967 cast a shadow over Paul's upbringing, exposing him to the grim realities of life and death at a young age. Through Paul's tumultuous journey, a complex and unsettling portrait emerged, revealing the interplay between family history, personal choices, and the darkest depths of human nature. In 1974, a mere 2 days after Paul entered the world, tragedy struck with haunting consequences. Peter Dyson, his father, found himself entangled in a fatal accident. Behind the wheel, he collided with 47-year-old Gordon Kell, who was returning home after jubilantly celebrating a silver wedding anniversary. In a chilling turn of events, Peter fled the scene, leaving Gordon to perish on the roadside. Despite the gravity of the situation, Paul idolized his father, viewing him through a lens of admiration and heroism. The untimely demise of Peter in 2000, succumbing to a heart attack in the midst of their life in Saudi Arabia, left an indelible mark on Paul's psyche. It cast a shadow over his existence, shaping the trajectory of his fate in ways both profound and ominous. As the trial unfolded on November 7, 2005, a hushed courtroom bore witness to a startling revelation. Paul, in a dramatic turn of events, stunned onlookers by entering a guilty plea. Joanne's family, bracing themselves for a protracted and grueling legal battle, found themselves thrust into a realm of disbelief and uncertainty. In a moment of collective astonishment, they whispered affirmations as Paul's admission reverberated through the chamber. Throughout the proceedings, Paul maintained a stoic demeanor, his gaze fixed straight ahead or cast downward, deliberately avoiding the piercing stares of Joanne's grieving loved ones and the scrutiny of law enforcement. Not a flicker of emotion crossed his impassive countenance, not even during the formal announcement of the charges against him. His lawyer, Harry Barl, stood before the court, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. With unwavering resolve, he conceded that there could be no excuse for the heinous act perpetrated by his client. In the wake of Paul's shocking confession, a pall of solemnity descended upon the courtroom, marking the beginning of a harrowing journey toward justice and closure. On Tuesday, November 8th, nearly 10 months after the tragic murder, Paul received his sentence. Life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. Remarkably, just 14 years later, in November 2019, at the age of 45, Paul found himself transferred to an open prison and recommended for day release. The parole board cited Paul's active engagement in self-awareness programs and successful completion of an intensive interpersonal relationship improvement program. Recalling the day of Joanne's disappearance, Katie was struck by Paul's behavior. She now regrets offering him comfort when he appeared at her doorstep. Later, when Paul wandered off, Katie, consumed by worry, searched for him. Finding him at the bus stop, she squeezed his hands in an attempt to provide support as he sat there, overcome with emotion. She even embraced him, hoping to offer solace. Reflecting on the moment, Katie admitted she hadn't initially noticed the scratches on his arm. But upon later reflection, she couldn't forgive herself for missing them. The easing of Paul's detention conditions and the prospect of day release stirred deep emotional turmoil within Joanne's family. Katie, speaking to the media, expressed their sense of loss and confusion in the face of this news. Paul's impending release dredged up painful memories of Joanne's untimely death, leaving the family grappling with a sense of injustice. Despite their belief that Paul didn't deserve such leniency for his heinous actions, on October 1, 1993, 12-year-old Polly Klaus Petaluma invited two friends for a sleepover. The evening proceeded smoothly until Polly's mother, Eva, was abruptly awoken by intense screaming. She soon discovered that her daughter had been kidnapped by an unknown assailant. Lihanna Klaus was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California. Her family comprised her father, Mark, her mother, Eva, and her younger sister, Annie. When she was very young, her parents separated. Following the separation, Polly and her sister went to live with their mother in Petaluma. Mark subsequently entered a new relationship, and Polly developed a positive relationship with his partner. This arrangement created a harmonious family dynamic where Polly spent time with both parents without any issues. Polly is often described as a quiet and innocent child. Although she had friends, she was generally shy. However, she found confidence in theater. Polly participated actively in school plays and various musicals organized by her community. Frequently cast in lead roles, her primary aspiration was to become a successful actress in musical theater. Furthermore, Polly had a fondness for sleepovers. She enjoyed having friends over and visiting friends' homes for such gatherings, a regular activity within her social circle. On October 1st of that year, when she asked Eva if two friends, Jillian and Kate, could come over for a sleepover, her mother readily agreed. That afternoon, the friends arrived at Polly's house and spent the evening there quite contentedly initially. At around 9:45 p.m., Eva decided to go to bed due to a severe headache. Informing the girls of this decision and asking them not to hesitate waking her if necessary, she took 2 sleeping pills and fell into deep sleep shortly thereafter. It was past 11 p.m. when Eva was startled awake by the screams of her daughter's friends. Both girls informed her that a man had broken into the house and taken Polly. Eva immediately contacted the police and checked on her other, Annie, who appeared unaware of the commotion. When authorities arrived, they began questioning Polly's friends. The girls described that they had been in a room, engaged in activities like picking Halloween costumes and indulging in general playful behavior. At approximately 11 p.m., Polly suggested it was bedtime, and her friends agreed. She mentioned fetching an inflatable bed she'd prepared with her mom, so they could all sleep together. Upon opening the bedroom door, they were confronted by a man brandishing a knife. The man did not conceal his face with a mask. Initially, due to the proximity to Halloween, the girls mistook this for a prank and laughed. Realizing it wasn't a joke, they became frightened as the man grew angry at their laughter. He forced them into another room and tied their hands and feet. Inquiring who resided in the house, they all identified Polly as the inhabitant. The intruder then removed pillowcases from nearby pillows, placed them over Jillian and Kate's heads, instructing them to count to 1,000. He assured them he was taking Polly for a brief period, but would bring her back soon. After determining that their captor had left, Jillian and Kate attempted to free themselves. This effort lasted around 30 minutes. Once free, they rushed to inform Eva about Polly's abduction. They relayed this entire sequence to the police and provided a detailed description of the suspect since he didn't hide his face. This enabled officers to create a sketch of the individual for immediate investigation. Evidence at Polly's residence was sparse. Footprints noted were from Polly, her family, and recent visitors only. However, fibers found on the carpet differed significantly from those within Polly's home. These fibers were later identified as originating from automotive carpeting material. Police examined vehicles associated with individuals known to be at the house recently, yet found no match with these fibers, leading them to conclude that they belonged to the kidnapper's vehicle. A palm print was also discovered, but couldn't be thoroughly analyzed due to technological limitations at that time. This detailed account provided critical insight for law enforcement's pursuit of justice in identifying and apprehending Polly's abductor. Back in 1993, advancements in fingerprinting, DNA analysis, and other forensic techniques were not what they are today. As a result, the found palm print with any database was not feasible at that time. However, the print was preserved for future comparisons with potential suspects. In Polly's room, another piece of evidence, a fabric that seemed to be silk, was discovered. It looked like it had been cut scissors from a garment and had a distinctive patterns going. Police believed this could aid them in future investigations. Additionally, a hair belonging to an unknown individual was found. Although DNA analysis techniques existed then, they were not yet developed enough to be effectively utilized. The search for Polly became one of the largest searches conducted in the United States up to that point. Around 4,000 volunteers joined the efforts, combing through neighborhoods near her home, vacant lots, and large estates in the vicinity. Police attempted to find drivers who resembled a sketch of the suspect, but were unsuccessful. Officers aimed to find Polly within 24 hours of her disappearance, because finding her alive would become increasingly difficult after that period. The FBI was involved to assist with the investigation, launching their efforts to locate her as quickly as possible. Despite their best efforts, days went by, and hope of finding Polly alive started to wane. Police questioned neighbors about any unusual activity on the night Polly was abducted. Several neighbors reported seeing an odd man wandering around the area, but they did not suspect he would kidnap someone from a neighbor's house, and thus did not alert emergency services. When police shared a sketch, based on descriptions from Polly's friends with these neighbors, they all confirmed having seen the man. Officers also spoke with all the teachers and staff at Polly's school. They aimed to find out if anyone knew the man, or had any information regarding Polly's disappearance. Alas, no one had any knowledge, and everyone had an alibi for the relevant time period. None of the school staff matched either the sketch or the description provided. The police even compared fibers found in Polly's house with car mats from teachers' and staff members' cars, but none were a match. As days turned into weeks, the desperation of Polly's family, authorities, and the public increased. There was a growing fear that the man who kidnapped Polly posed a significant threat to society. This added more pressure on the police to resolve the case swiftly. A reward of $200,000 was offered for information leading to Polly's whereabouts, sponsored by actress Winona Ryder, who held a press conference urging for Polly's safe return. The Polly Kloss case had another peculiarity. In 1993, internet use wasn't widespread nor utilized by law enforcement for search operations or information dissemination. However, 3 California residents took it upon themselves to leverage this new technology for the search effort. They posted pictures of Polly, sketches of her kidnapper, and reward details online. Their efforts eventually reached an estimated 25 million people in the U.S. via various internet forums and communication channels. While the FBI hoped this would be pivotal in their investigation, it didn't yield significant leads. Despite heightened publicity and numerous tips, investigators lacked solid leads. Weeks elapsed since Polly's kidnapping. Frustration grew among investigators as they were unable to identify the kidnapper or obtain a DNA match from evidence collected. This sense of helplessness persisted until receiving an unexpected phone call. A turning point that held promise but quickly evaporated into uncertainty. Mark Klass received a call from someone claiming to be his daughter Polly. The girl stated she was at a hotel and that her captor had just stepped out briefly, giving her a chance to reach out. Unfortunately, the call was abruptly cut short before any additional details could be gathered. Mark promptly went to the police to inform them about the situation. At that time, the FBI lacked advanced tools to trace previously made calls. Consequently, they waited for another call, hoping to trace it. A few hours later, a second call came in from the same girl who had first spoken to Mark. After receiving this call, the police traced it and were surprised when it led them not to a hotel but to a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived at the identified house, they knocked and soon discovered it was a prank. A teenage girl, similar in age to Polly, lived there, hence the voice resemblance. She explained her friends had dared her. Rather than taking her to the police station, they asked her parents to monitor her activities and cautioned her against making jokes about such serious matters. On November 28, 1993, nearly 2 months after Polly's disappearance, a woman called the police reporting 3 suspicious objects on a large piece of land she owned. The police and FBI who arrived on site found critical items related to the investigation. A piece of silk matching one from Polly's room, ballet ties missing since that night, as mentioned by Eva, and duct tape. This discovery led police to speculate that Polly might be in the vicinity. Further investigation revealed new information. On the day of Polly's disappearance, this same woman had reported strangers frequently trespassing on her extensive wooded property with only a small house and no perimeter fence. The lack of barriers and signage meant many inadvertently wandered onto her land without realizing it was private property. The woman had numerous intruders, but one incident in particular stood out. On the night Polly was abducted, a man approached her house in his automobile. His car became stuck in the mud. The nanny, who was caring for the woman's son, first saw the man, but refrained from confronting him due to fear. The homeowner also chose not to approach him, noting an angry expression in his eyes. They then contacted the police. When the officers arrived, they questioned the man about his presence on the property. He stated he was unaware it was private property and expressed willingness to leave quickly, but requested assistance freeing his car from the mud. The officers observed that the man appeared very nervous and scared. He was sweating and seemed possibly drugged. At that time, they lacked the means to conduct a drug test, and since he wasn't being overtly aggressive, they had no grounds for arrest. Consequently, they aided him in extricating his car from the mud, and he eventually drove away. This individual's name was Richard Allen Davis. Richard Allen Davis was born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. His childhood was fraught with violence inflicted by his parents. When Richard was 12 years old, his parents separated. His mother completely disowned him and left him with his father. Richard's father proved to be highly irresponsible, often leaving him alone for extended periods. Sometimes Richard stayed with neighbors or relatives when alone at home became untenable. By his teenage years, Richard started engaging in criminal activities, stealing things, and getting into street fights frequently led to reform school stints. At 17 years old came a significant turning point in Richard's life. He committed a violent robbery that nearly resulted in severe injury to his victim. Faced with 2 options by the court, reform school or joining the U.S. Army, Richard opted for military service but lasted less than 2 years before receiving a dishonorable discharge due to continued misconduct and poor behavior. As Richard matured, he continued to encounter problems, and his criminal record grew significantly longer. Around the age of 20, he received a 15 sentence for robbery and kidnapping. Despite this, he served only 1 year of the sentence due to parole for good behavior. At that period, Richard was also troubled by another accusation. Many friends believed that he had been involved in the disappearance, a 19-year-old girl named Marlene. Although the police concluded that she had left voluntarily, her close friends were convinced Richard had a role in her disappearance after they attended a party together. These accusations remained unproven and were largely based on rumors. When Polly disappeared, Richard was on probation and did not have a specific address. In response, the police issued a special bulletin exclusively for officers, urging them to exercise extreme caution. They withheld information from the media to prevent Richard from potentially fleeing California or even leaving the country. Ultimately, on November 13, 1993, Richard was arrested while driving under the influence of alcohol, following a routine traffic stop by an officer. He failed a breathalyzer test. Upon inspection of his identity and photograph, the officer quickly realized that this was the individual linked to the Polly Glass kidnapping case. Proceeding with care, the officer informed Richard that he was being arrested for violating his probation due to drunk driving. Without resistance, Richard agreed and was taken into custody. Once at the police station, officers read him his rights and disclosed that he was actually being detained for polyglass kidnapping. During an extensive interrogation session, Richard eventually admitted to abducting Polly. The police speculated that his confession might have been made under duress. Evidence collected included his palm print, which matched one found at Polly's house perfectly. Carpet fibers from Polly's house were identical to those in his car's carpet as well. Polly's friends were brought in for questioning at the police station, where they unequivocally identified Richard as her abductor, stripling closure to their distressful ordeal. Another piece of silk, identical to the one found in the girl's room, was also discovered in his car and on the property of the woman who had contacted the police. Everything was against him, so he finally decided to confess. He mentioned that he had been using illegal substances with friends that day and was not feeling well. He made the decision to break into a house in a certain neighborhood to commit a burglary. Richard drove around for some time before arriving in Polly's neighborhood. He noticed an open window in a house and decided to climb in. According to him, he did not plan anything, never saw Polly, never saw her family, nor followed them. Once inside the house, he looked for valuables but found few items of interest. Just as he was about to leave, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. Richard observed that Polly appeared very frightened, so he ultimately decided to take her with him. He stated that he put Polly in his car, began driving, and after a while stopped at a vacant lot. There, he violated Polly. Following this incident, he resumed driving. When the woman and babysitter saw Richard on private property, Polly was still in the back seat of his car. When police officers helped him pull his vehicle out of the mud, Polly was still alive. This caused much frustration among law enforcement personnel who believed her life could have been saved. Afterwards, Richard said he drove down the highway where he strangled Polly, dug a grave, and left her body there. On December 4, 1993, Richard informed police about the precise location of the grave where they began their search efforts. 2 months and 3 days after her kidnapping, Polly Klaas' body was located on the side of a highway in a grave dug by Richard himself. Forensic examination revealed little additional information. It confirmed that strangulation was indeed the cause of death. As stated by Richard, further details could not be determined with precision. However, it is understood that her death occurred roughly around the time she disappeared. Given all the evidence, the man was put on trial for kidnapping, murder, and rape of Polly Klaas. During the trial, Richard had a chance to speak. He not only apologized to the family, but also made a serious accusation against Polly's father, claiming he abused her. Richard stated that she said to him, "Don't do to me what my father does to me." This caused Polly's father to yell and almost stand up to hit him, though he was restrained by others. The defendant's words shocked everyone present, not just because of his accusation and lack of genuine apology, but also because no one believed Polly's father had done such things. Although it wasn't proven, Polly's former partner even defended him. On June 18, 1996, Richard was found guilty of Polly Klaas kidnapping and murder. In August of that year, he received a death sentence. He attempted to challenge this sentence but failed. Then in 2006, after overdosing on pills in his cell, he was found unconscious but revived and sent back to prison. In 2009, his lawyer tried appealing his conviction to the Supreme Court, but was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court confirmed that he should be executed. Richard's attorney mentioned plans for further appeals. As a result of these continued appeals, Richard has remained on death row for several years without being executed. There is hope that once all appeals are exhausted within the next few years, the execution will proceed as planned. Amy Widener faced a significant life change when she became a mother at only giving birth to a daughter. This development was notably challenging for her mother, Gloria Widner. Despite the difficulties, Gloria steadfastly supported her daughter. Little did Gloria know that the complexity of handling her daughter's early pregnancy would soon be eclipsed by an even more distressing event affecting their family just 2 years later. Born in 1973, Amy Widener was part of a large family that included her older brother, John Paul, who was 1 year older than Amy, and 2 younger sisters, Nee and Cassie, who were 1 and 4 years younger respectively. Their mother, Gloria Widener, single-handedly raised the children following a long-ago divorce from their father, who played no role in their upbringing. The family of 5 resided in Indianapolis, where Amy was her mother's primary aide, handling cooking, cleaning, and caring for her sisters. Amy harbored dreams of becoming a teacher. She was known for her bright and cheerful demeanor, as well as an engaging smile. However, at age 14, Amy's life took an unexpected turn when she became pregnant. Initially hesitant to share the news with her mother, she concealed her growing belly under loose clothing for over 5 months. Eventually, the pregnancy became difficult to hide any longer. After nearly 6 months, Amy found the courage to approach her mother. Breaking down in tears, she revealed her situation. "Mom, I don't want you to hate me," she tearfully confided. Although taken aback by the news, Gloria embraced her daughter with comforting words of support despite feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about what lay ahead. "I was stunned. I just couldn't believe it," Gloria recounted later. "I thought it was the worst thing that could happen in my life." She added, unaware of even more heart-wrenching events that were yet to unfold. Amy Widener's baby was fathered by Tony Abba, 20, who was a friend of her elder brother. Their relationship had been a well-kept secret. None of their family members were aware of their intimacy until Amy's pregnancy came to light. Gloria, Amy's mother, swiftly intervened. She prohibited any further contact between Amy and Tony. She insisted that Amy cut ties completely with the father of her unborn child, laying down strict conditions for her daughter's future interactions. On October 25, 1987, Amy Widener embraced motherhood by welcoming her daughter, Emily, into the world. Remarkably, just 6 days after giving birth, Amy resumed her education. Now she juggled the responsibilities of being a new mother. Gloria Widener, recognizing the importance of education for her daughter's future, provided unwavering support to Amy. She often cared for Emily to facilitate Amy's schooling. Gloria also acknowledged Amy's need for a typical teenage life and allowed her time with friends. Amy's dedication to her studies never waned, even amidst the demands of motherhood. She continued to excel academically, earning praise from her teachers for her diligence and hard work. The Widener family adapted to the new addition by sharing the responsibilities of caring for Emily. Life seemed to be realigning on a positive path as years passed. Amy successfully navigated her challenges. However, just as they found their footing, a sudden turn of events altered everything. On November 13, 1989, 16-year-old Amy awoke with a severe sore throat and decided to stay home from school with her 2-year-old daughter, Emily. When Gloria offered to take Emily to the nanny's house, Amy opted to keep her daughter with her. After the family shared breakfast, they dispersed for the day. Gloria headed to work, and Amy's siblings went off to school, leaving Amy and Emily at home alone. Concerned after no answer from multiple calls made at 9:30 a.m., and again hours later, Gloria asked a neighbor to check in on them. The neighbor's report of an unresponsive and unusually quiet house worried Gloria, so she left work and rushed home. Upon arrival, she found Emily sitting on the stairs. Receiving no answer to her calls for rest, Amy prompted her venture upstairs. The scene in Amy's bedroom was tragic and shocking, a moment etched forever in memory. Amy lay lifeless and unclad on her bed, surrounded by a significant amount of blood. In a state of emergency, Gloria immediately dialed 911. Upon arrival, the police commenced a meticulous examination of the Widener residence. The scene initially suggested an attempted burglary as stereo equipment and a graphic equalizer belonging to Amy's older brother, John, were missing. Also gone from Amy's room was a simple glass jar piggy bank containing around $50 saved for school. There were no signs of forced entry. The perpetrator might have entered through an unlocked back door, or possibly the front door, opened by Amy herself. Crucial evidence was found in Amy's room. There was bloody palm print on the bed linen and wall, along with several strands of body and head hair, presumably from the assailant. The medical examiner concluded that Amy Widener sustained a blow to the head with a sharp object. She was sexually assaulted and ultimately strangled. It's deeply unsettling that Emily, Amy's 2-year-old daughter, could have witnessed these harrowing events. Fortuitously, she was found unharmed. Recognizing any information Emily might provide as potentially valuable, police made efforts to communicate with her, despite her young age of just over 2 years. They used finger puppets to create a more child-friendly environment and gently probed for details she could recall. During this interaction, Emily, energetically moving around, mentioned only that her mother seemed very angry that day. As part of the evidence collection process, police sectioned off and removed the portion of the wall bearing the assailant's bloody palm print. They also gathered the victim's clothing and bed linens from the crime scene to aid their investigation into this tragic case. In their pursuit for answers regarding Amy Widener's case, detectives initiated inquiries among her family, friends, and nearby residents. John Paul, Amy's 17-year-old brother, mentioned how the investigators initially suspected him during the interrogation. However, he had a reliable alibi and no evidence linked him to the incident. Tony Abeer, Amy's former boyfriend and Emily's father, was also interrogated. He expressed deep affection for Amy and denied any harmful intentions towards her. Tony had a solid alibi for the day of the crime. The police's attention was also drawn to Troy Jackson, who lived next to the Wideners. He knew about the stereo system stolen on the day of the murder. Despite his denial of involvement and the absence of any bruises or scratches on his hands, Troy provided hair samples that did not match those found at the crime scene. After passing a polygraph test, suspicions against him were dropped. Besides these three, the police interviewed other acquaintances, neighbors, and classmates of Amy. Fingerprints and hair samples were taken from all of them, but none fell under suspicion. Amy Widener's funeral was held shortly afterward, drawing a considerable crowd who wished to pay their respects. Her death was deeply felt within the community. Detectives attended the funeral too, carefully observing the attendees as part of their ongoing investigation. A particularly poignant memory was a cherished photograph of Amy, where she wore her favorite white turtleneck vest with a floral design. It was in this beloved attire that Amy, a young girl whose life was tragically cut short, was laid to rest. In the aftermath of their tragic loss, the Widener family clung to hope that Amy's killer would be swiftly apprehended and brought to justice. Yet as days turned into weeks and then months, no suspects were identified. Following Amy's passing, Gloria Widener legally adopted her granddaughter Emily, stepping into the role of motherhood once again. The weight of grief and fear burdened Gloria. She was haunted by thoughts of the perpetrator and worried about her family's safety. She never left her daughters unattended at home and lived in a state of constant anxiety, with the assailant still at large. Gloria even considered relocating to a new home for safety reasons. Financial constraints limited their options, leaving them to navigate these challenging times in their current residence. Amy's friends were also deeply affected by the tragedy, consumed by fear that the criminal might target them next. They requested their parents to fortify their homes, even boarding up windows with planks, a precautionary measure against a similar fate. One day, Gloria returned home expecting to find her younger daughters back from school. Upon entering, she was met with an unsettling silence. The house felt unusually empty. She noticed that the girls' outdoor shoes were in their usual spot. A surge of dreadful thoughts raced through her mind, apprehending another calamity with each step towards the upstairs. The distance felt increasingly vast. Standing at the threshold of their bedroom, Gloria steeled herself for what she might find. Upon entering, she discovered, much to her relief, that her daughters had merely fallen asleep. As time went on, Emily, Amy's daughter, matured. She was spared the memories of the tragic events surrounding her biological mother. Emily had no recollection of the police interrogation or being informed of her mother's demise. The detectives periodically revisited the Wagner family, inadvertently causing them to revisit the pain of that dreadful day. Gloria revealed that there came a time when this continual revisiting became too much to bear. She yearned for one thing, for the authorities to allow her family some peace, and to cease reawakening memories that could not bring Amy back. 13 years after Amy Wagner's murder in 2002, an unexpected development arose in the case. The Indianapolis Police Department received a call from a 29-year-old man claiming to have had a dream where Amy communicated with him about her demise. Although he provided details about the murder, most of this information had already been disclosed in news reports. The police investigated this individual, who was 16 at the time of the incident, and resided across the street from Amy's home. His fingerprints and DNA were examined to determine any potential involvement, but no matches were found, leading to his release. While his call didn't contribute significant evidence, it prompted detectives to re-examine the cold case in 2002. The investigation re-engaged with some of Amy's friends and acquaintances, particularly those who had encountered legal issues over the intervening years. Despite renewed efforts, the investigation once again reached an impasse, leaving the case unsolved. In 2011, a Facebook group titled Remembering Amy, where was established by Amy's friends, reigniting interest in her unsolved case. The detective responsible for the cold case, unfamiliar with Facebook, enlisted the help of his colleague, Detective Bill Carter, to print out information from the group. This task piqued Carter's interest in Amy Ware's case. Although his expertise was in non-homicide-related illegal activities, Carter felt compelled to explore the case files of Amy's murder during his free time. Carter delved deep into the 2-decade-old case. He scrutinized every detail in the file, re-examining evidence and reviewing school attendance records from the day of the murder. He also scrutinized the funeral attendance list. He inputted the case details into a database and identified overlooked leads, including several friends of Amy's brother, who had never been interviewed by the police, nor had their DNA been collected. In his pursuit of new leads, Detective Carter reached out to the Ware family and Amy's friends in 2011, seeking names of individuals who might possess information about the case. He initiated DNA collection from persons previously overlooked in the initial 1989 investigation following the crime. The police had canvassed the neighborhood where the Wares lived and documented residents' names. Amy had long-standing friends, and while she reiterated most of the previously known and investigated, she also mentioned an unfamiliar name to Detective Carter, Rodney Dink. In 2012, Detective Carter received authorization from the Cold Case Unit to formally take on Amy Wagner's case. His first step was to locate Rodney Dink to ascertain whether he could be a potential suspect. The Wagner family was quite familiar with Rodney, as he was a friend of Amy's older brother, John Paul. They spent time together engaging in activities like biking and fishing. When Carter inquired about Rodney with John Paul, he described him as a reserved individual who largely kept to himself and had never aroused suspicion. Carter visited the home of 40-year-old Rodney Dink, who resided with his mother near the Wagners. Rodney was employed at an auto parts store, had been divorced for some time, and had a grown son with whom he had minimal contact. Upon Carter's arrival at Rodney's residence, his mother greeted him and informed the detective that Rodney was at work. Carter left his business card requesting Rodney contact him upon his return. That evening, Rodney called Carter, who promptly requested a meeting to discuss Amy Wagner's murder case. Rodney consented to the meeting and allowed Carter to visit at his house. However, when Carter returned for the meeting, Rodney was nowhere to be found. Carter examined Rodney's criminal background and found that he had previous charges for assault in 1991 and theft in 1997. With Rodney's fingerprints already in the database, they were compared with the palm print found at the Wagner residence. This test aimed to either connect or exonerate Rodney from the crime. When the results came back, they confirmed a match between Rodney's prints and the bloody palm print at the crime scene. After 23 years, a suspect was finally identified. However, Rodney had vanished from his home, prompting an intensive search by the police. The breakthrough came when Rodney's credit card activity revealed a rented car with an OnStar tracking system. The detectives located the car in Indianapolis where Rodney was hiding. Rodney, while at a friend's house, was confronted by the police. Brandishing a knife and declaring his innocence, he ultimately injured himself during the encounter. He attempted to attack the officers but was subdued with a taser, handcuffed, and then taken to the hospital. During a 2-day hospital interrogation that was recorded on camera, Rodney confessed to Amy's murder. He initially claimed his intent had been burglary and had not anticipated Amy's presence due to her illness. Rodney recounted entering through a sliding glass door and being startled by Amy. In a panic, he hastily grabbed the nearest object and struck her on the head, which led to her death. As he recounted the incident over 2 days, Rodney frequently mentioned his vague recollection of the events of that day. He attributed this fogginess to the 23 years that had elapsed since the crime occurred. His account of his actions lacked precision. At one point, he even suggested he had visited the house with an acquaintance he referred to as Bag. However, Rodney struggled to recall clear details about this supposed accomplice and could not provide a description of their appearance. According to Rodney, Bag had initially kept watch outside before joining him inside, where they both confronted Amy. When questioned about Emily's presence during the incident, Rodney claimed he did not see her nor was aware of her cries in the house, oblivious to the fact that she had been nearby throughout the ordeal. Throughout the interrogation, Rodney remained composed and polite, not exhibiting behavior typically associated with a murderer, possibly due to the passage of time since committing the crime. His DNA sample was taken and, as anticipated, it matched that found in 1989 on Amy Wagner's bedsheet and blanket. The disclosure of Rodney's guilt came as a profound shock to the Wagner family. They struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, unassuming Rodney with his heinous act. Rodney wasn't just Amy's older brother, John Paul's friend and classmate. He also lived across the street and frequently visited their home. Remarkably, Rodney had even attended Amy's funeral, mourning with others and extending condolences to Gloria Wadner. Later, Detective Carter discovered Rodney's signature in the guest book at Amy's funeral. Upon revisiting the case, he found that Rodney's name was first mentioned in 2003 by Tony Abercrombie, Amy's former boyfriend and Emily's biological father, who pointed out Rodney's regular visits to the Wadner family. Carter deduced that back in 1989, for some unknown reason, Rodney Den had evaded suspicion entirely. He wasn't considered a suspect or even questioned at that time. In 2012, while investigating Rodney Den's background further, detectives unearthed another grim detail. Rodney's biological son, Dylan Dank, was imprisoned for a crime committed in 2009. At just 16 years old, Dylan had fatally assaulted his birth mother, Mary McHenry. He claimed he acted out due to her abuse and insults, ultimately using a baseball bat to inflict fatal injuries. Tragically, Mary succumbed to her wounds. Dylan turned 17 just days after the incident. This eerie parallel, father and son committing significant crimes at almost similar ages, struck detectives as both chilling and peculiar. Despite having minimal involvement in Dylan's upbringing due to divorcing Mary McHenry early on, Rodney appeared at Dylan's trial in 2009 and agreed to a plea deal, resulting in a 20-year prison sentence. Dylan's anticipated release will be in 2029 when he turns 37 years old. In the ongoing investigation of Amy Widener's case, Rodney Dink initially maintained that he had an accomplice during the crime, a young man. In June 2013, merely 10 days before his trial was scheduled to commence, year-old Rodney recanted his previous statement. He admitted to acting alone in the murder of Amy, asserting that no one else was involved. As a result of this confession and the evidence against him, Rodney received a sentence of 65 years in prison. Following the resolution of Amy's case, the Wader family arranged a gathering with Detective Bill Carter. They commemorated the 24 years without Amy by releasing 24 balloons into the sky. The family expressed their gratitude for Detective Carter's pivotal role in the case. It was Carter who pinpointed Rodney Den as the perpetrator within just 12 days of delving into the case and brought the investigation to a close. In recognition of his outstanding work, Detective Bill Carter was honored with an award by the Indianapolis Police Department in January 2014. Despite an offer to join the Homicide Investigation Department, he chose to remain in his current role. Emily Ware, Amy's daughter, matured into adulthood. She graduated from the same high school her biological mother had attended before pursuing higher education at a university. Seeking broader opportunities, she relocated from Indianapolis to California. Gloria Ware, Amy's mother, openly shared her enduring grief and daily remembrance of her daughter. She continues to reside in the house where the tragedy unfolded. Amy's room, still adorned with her photographs, now welcomes Gloria's grandchildren during their holiday visits. This brings a new sense of joy and life to a space once marked by loss.